Yes, they win.
And we're now officially live for another lore ramblings babble thing. In this case, we're talking about the Plague Father, mainly because a couple weeks ago, I'm not kidding when I can say most of my tabletopping crew unironically caught some strain of respiratory infection that spread almost like it went through Discord itself. That's why we're covering this book, and the name is Adam.
I'm Imsit. And
Thankfully, I'm not
yeah, we'll
contagious
talk.
anymore, so internet disease won't get you this time.
We'll be talking about Nurgle. So, Adam, I guess what's your experience with Nurgle?
Every now and again, we're talking specifically. Well, recently, like I said, respiratory illness. That was fun. Um, I think the closest that Nurgle's ever personally touched me was the time I caught both strep and the flu. I actually was dealing with the
Oh,
aftermath of it unironically during the early stages of Scum. If you ever wonder why I sometimes hacked like a coal miner or like a crazy crotchety old prospector in those earlier ones, it's mostly because again I had two respiratory illnesses at the same time. So yeah, Nurgle and I have at least met a few times. His cooking is literally to die for, unironically, and
he's
that's
a
what we're
lovely
covering.
grandfather.
He's like the
Yeah,
grandpa that
so
doesn't know that you don't put so much nutmeg in your cancer.
so back when Fantasy Flight had the license for uh, Warhammer 40k RPGs, they released an entire section on playing as Chaos,
Oh
as
no,
a
it's not just a
normal
section;
guys and
it's a
trick.
game. What they did was
Yeah.
they made a variety of deep percentile games. Um, starting with Dark Heresy, where you're playing as agents of the Inquisition. Then from there, I believe they either created Black Crusade next or they did Rogue Trader. Then they did Only War, which was the Imperial Guard point of view of it. And they also had Death Watch because, everyone wanted to play Space Marines at one point or another. Unironically, the first edition of Dark Heresy, I don't think that was when Death Watch was around. I think that came around near second. But first edition actually had a conversion rule set if you wanted to play Space Marine. It was something like I believe you added an extra die to most of your stats and you gained like something akin to 12,000 experience points worth.
Yeah, because the way the game is balanced, you are just normal humans.
Well, mostly.
If you're fighting a Space Marine, you're fucked. You're just
Yeah.
absolutely screwed.
Black
So,
Crusade basically kind of looked at that and said, okay, here's how you can do this, but for chaos. It is a very popular. It's very popular to talk about, but in my experience, games never go very far. And it's a combination of just either you find out that it's not necessarily your cup of tea what you're focused on, or what's more likely, because there's a bit of opposition in your player group, because that's the point. It's a bit like paranoia. You're kind of scheming against each other, at least partially. A bit of a tie to evil has a habit of eating its own.
because the end result is you want to become a demon prince, and so you have to end up worshiping one of the gods, and that will inevitably put you in conflict with the group. Not only that, but you
Not
can have Space
no no.
Marines,
It's more that
and
no. It's more that you're pretty much all lost and damned. The conflict comes when you choose to start worshiping different gods, or in some cases the same god. Unironically, an all Tzeentch game of Black Crusade is a very wild ride. A very,
the,
very wild ride.
the other issue is the fact that you can't have Chaos Space Marines and regular humans in the same team. And yes, it is not really balanced.
Oh god, no. That's one of the bigger kind of weaknesses. Although it does lead to the very comedic moment, because the way Black Crusade works is you could literally finish your first mission, and if the gods noticed you, oopsie doopsie, you just became a demon prince. Your character's done. That has actually happened on at least one occasion. Not in any games I've played, but I know for a fact it has happened on at least one occasion.
Reminds me of the time back when they had rules on the tabletop for if you had killed a champion with your champion, you
Yeah?
could roll on a E66 table, and if you got a 65 or a 66, character just became a demon prince. I got that once. I don't think it was on a regular human. I think it was on a space marine, but still, got the demon prince. That was a great time.
A really funny one would be an Ogren getting it.
Oh no, no. The joke would be because you had to have your unit squad leader fight in a challenge, and the rules is written. Your normal cultists had a champion, so if that champion killed the other guy, you could potentially become a demon prince
I
just
mean,
right out.
it really does depend sometimes on just if the gods are laughing at the moment. Like it could be something absolutely ridiculous. I am not kidding. We played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay a lot more. We actually played an old Chaos game. Um, Unironically, one of the players actually gained pseudo daemonhood and some pretty insane bonuses out of it, simply because he decided to let the intrusive thoughts in his head win and CBT himself into mutilation.
Was he Slanesh?
No, no,
What does
Slanesh just
CBT
found
mean
it
in this
so
case?
funny.
Oh, so it still was that kind of CBT.
No, it was a cod piece with the spikes pointed in. That was clearly cursed.
Well,
He listened to the voices in
let's
his head, which was basically the rest of the player group just, saying, totally do it, like we were just fucking with him. He did it. And then he had the.
let us move
No,
on
no, no, no.
then.
There's one more. There's actually a sequel to it that I want to talk about because it's equally funny. After realizing what the fuck he just did, he then decided to go to, because we managed to actually beat a Skaven into submission, a Skaven who specializes in medicine, to fix what he did to himself. It glows in the dark. Anyway, you distract them. For some reason, timing has gone off the rails.
All right, so Squirrel Killer saying mostly interchangeable system, and yeah, because it's a E100 percentile, and an example of a lone Deathwatch survivor dragged into an inquisitorial retinue for Dark Heresy. But yeah, I did think of an idea of you could somehow technically string along an entire campaign of a rogue trader, inquisitor, guardsman, space marine, just end up in chaos. Because if I recall, the corruption rating in like Dark Heresy goes from 0 to 100. 100 is where you would start with Black Crusade. So it's a they say could be a bit of an interesting campaign if you transfer from one system to the other. Um, Besides that, I am surprised that the amount of detail that have been in the Fantasy Flight games and the lore they've made that is still carried on, because I believe the Calexis sector and the Kronos Expanse and all this stuff is referenced in current Warhammer lore. So
Sorry
it's very
about
nice
that.
that they've kept up with that.
What now?
I was just saying how the lore that's in Fantasy Flight games is still discussed and is still brought up in current Warhammer lore.
That is actually a pretty
It's
nice
nice that there's
touch.
this continuity.
Speaking of which, let's actually finally get into the game itself. Sorry about that. The actual Plague Father had me dispose of actual, well, filth. I had to actually do that. So we're in the introduction. We're just kind of gonna quickly go through. I believe. Are we even gonna cover chapter one?
I'd say so because, at least for me, when I first read this, it gave me a new understanding of Nurgle. Because before I thought it was all just plagues and disease.
Fair
But
enough.
I didn't really understand the concept of it's cyclical, as it says. To live is to eventually die. The
Yeah.
inescapable fact of all mortal life. Almost all those aware of their lives fear and dread this final end, which echoes the collapse of all order into disorder through remorseless entropy. Many strive to avoid such a fate, and are willing to perform any deed or suffer any woe to keep death from their door, if only for one more day. This is perhaps futile, but it can attract the attention of one who represents both ruin and the struggle against it that typifies all life. Wherever there is life, there is decay, and where there is decay, there is Nurgle.
Where is that little
It's
segment?
a cycle of life and death. When your body dies, obviously new life springs from it.
Mm-hmm.
Decay, your flesh is eaten, bacteria grows on it, but that bacteria then also dies, and your body is then used by plants for new life. That life eventually is digested or withers away, and it's an entire cycle of decay. Instead of fearing that, Nurgle, you embrace it by becoming the disease.
Ah, yeah, it's imparting hope to a hopeless existence. Yeah.
Yes. Problem is, though, is that you're still suffering. You're not necessarily free of the suffering. You are just infecting people and passing it on.
Mm-hmm. Unironically, it's your connections to Nurgle and being kind of essentially a root of his rot that legitimately lets you ignore the literal agony you're in. There's a section in another book where a couple of some plague marines actually for a second are isolated from it, and they're just screeching in agony and suffering and realize what the fuck they've done. It is almost drug like in that respect, almost like an opioid.
It's like an opioid, or I remember someone commenting somewhere that it's like giving into depression.
Yeah.
Something like you're not fighting whatever you are dealing with. You're just letting yourself succumb to it.
Which is actually pretty similar since you described the cyclical nature of things. Unironically, these more nuanced takes that you're seeing in Black Crusade are somewhat more inspired from Warhammer Fantasy since they are the same gods after all. Where worship of the chaos entities in there are a little more nuanced. It's actually kind of interesting since Warhammer Fantasy kind of takes fantasy ideas and ramps them up to 11. 40k kind of takes what fantasy did and ramps it up to 11. So you don't really see the positives, I would say, because there's like a
I mean,
positive aspect. Death begets life, you know.
you have seen some, and in some ways they've taken it to extremes. I forget the warband, but it is a specific warband that was responsible for, I think it was the Valaxian genocides. About 14 billion people, and their entire ethos is death part of Nurgle. They're just entirely about killing, and they don't want the life part. They just want the death part, which gets them in conflict with the other forces of Nurgle.
You say that, but like that's more of an exception to the rule. Like you don't usually the nuanced takes are a little rarer in 40k. Like noticeably
Eh,
rarer. I think the idea is it's because of the scale of just how much is there. So putrescence personified. Let's see. That is the physical form of the play father. This is basically just describing as best as you can what the hell Nurgle even is.
so that image of the plague bearers, it's one of the best they've done.
Oh yeah, it's pretty darn good.
This screaming mouths. I have to say, Nurglings are the cutest things Games Workshop has ever made.
Which they do actually have Nurglings attacking, I believe, an adept somewhere in here. Where is it? I'm just going to show the picture if I can. I may have missed it. Okay,
Is
that's
that
okay.
as at the beginning?
It's at the very beginning.
Putrescence personified. We're able to delve into comparative histories and galaxy-wide myths associated with Nurgle. Certain commonalities will present themselves. As other gods within the realm of chaos are associated with dozens, even hundreds of depictions, there are far fewer variations on the appearance of the Plague Father. He is said to be a vast mound of rotting flesh, with open sores and gaping wounds in which his minions cavort and frolic. Gaping pustules ooze filth, and his bowels constantly issue putrescent waste.
Mm-hmm.
Beneath his fingernails, maggots and other carrion feeders lay eggs, around which develop cysts that periodically burst open and spew their rancid payloads. Hygienic than the average gamer.
Yeah. Essentially, Nurgle's the one that is most consistent in depictions. Like
To the point
even
where I believe the
Korn, who's a
great
very direct kind of guy, uh, there is kind of a slight variation on how he looks, because there is actually a sub depiction of him where he's more like a snarling hound.
Zinch can be whatever the hell he wants, and Slaanesh is
Zinch prides himself on not keeping consistent with his form. As for
um
Slanesh, they kind of adopt the identities of that which is most inviting. Also, legitimately, you go mad upon looking at them.
Nurgle
Literally.
is just a big, jolly fat guy. He lives claim in the called the Garden of Nurgle, which is, well, garden.
Yeah, it's a garden of sorts. This is where he conducts essentially experimentations with new and more inventive forms of illness.
It's a
He does a
bright
lot of
blue
experimentation with that. He also in the gardens plays around with a variety of new, essentially almost the way Nurgle is kind of interpreted is kind of interesting because it's similar to a concept called aparthogenesis. I think it's called aparthogenesis or abiogenesis. Not abiogenesis. It's basically there is this hypothesis that degenerate forms of life, such as maggots, toadstools, and stuff, can spontaneously appear in a decaying organism. And Nurgle kind of plays with that a little bit.
Interesting. Swirlco saying also no moderate chaos factions like the Northmen in 40k,
The Northmen are
which is
hardly that moderate.
well, some of the Norse skins are not. They'll raid, but they're not like the tribes further north. Um,
Also,
which is correct. I mean, we do see like the Blood Pact, which was a stable Khorne army. Yeah, no, we
there's also the period of time that Cathay was literally ruled by a Tzeentch cult. That was an actual period of time where all of Cathay essentially was ruled by Tzeentch. Not directly, but like by his cult. Also, in very early editions of Fantasy, again, Bretonia had massive issues with quelling Slaaneshi rebellions.
spontaneous generation is what you're thinking of.
Thank you, spontaneous generation. Abiogenesis is the explanation on how the first life forms came about. Essentially, how the hell did this happen? Spontaneous generation is the old-timey belief that, oh yeah, flies just kind of spontaneously pop out of old meat.
See, it's interesting because he says, unbeknownst to predators, bloatflies are carriers of many of Nurgle's experimental diseases and other creations.
Yep.
If their innards thus infected, these predators sicken, vomiting the contents of their guts all across the garden as they fly about and eventually exploding in showers of life-giving flesh and blood.
Yep.
A very unique form of organic compost.
It's basically the world's worst form of honeybee.
And there's the fact that the plague bearers were originally mortals, was infected with the uh,
With Nurgle's Rot.
swords.
Literally, lore-wise, Nurgle's Rot, if you if you die to it, which is almost certainly guaranteed, I think you can literally count on one hand with fingers remaining people have survived, who have somehow survived it. Uh, yeah, you die in the mortal planes and reawaken as a plague bearer. Like it doesn't matter what god you worshipped either. It's just it doesn't matter. You've been spiritually corrupted and turned into this entity.
There's the other thing. It's not just a physical disease; it is spiritual as well,
A lot of
and
his more
mental.
interesting illnesses are. Yeah.
There was one plague that I think paralyzed victims that was spread by sound.
I mean, again,
Um,
there's an aspect of Nurgle that sometimes could be played with, which is the sickness of the mind. You could unironically have a form of disease appear simply through thought alone, through a kind concept like the yellow sign.
Actually, no. I believe there was the plague of unbelief.
There was at the culmination of the plague of unbelief, you became essentially a zombie, or completely deluded and separate from reality itself. Actually,
And then, of course,
they
there's
don't
well,
specify it too well. I just during the plague of unbelief, it is known that that because zombies are a thing in 40k and in fantasy, a shitload of chaos zombies did occur during that period.
you have the poxwalkers, um, which yeah, they rot you down, but remain consciously cruelly conscious of everything that's going on.
Oh yeah,
The rictus grin. But, uh, continuing on with the uh, Big Lord's domain is his mansion, House of Decay at the center of the garden. Um, its racked and twisted structure creaks and groans under the influence of baleful toxic winds. Shutters cling just barely to its window frame, only half filled with broken panes of filth-covered glass.
we don't need to go fully purple prose on just like the plague mansion of Nurgle. Let's be fair.
It is good purple prose.
It is, but
Um,
we also have to cover because this book isn't just describing Nurgle's realm. Let's keep that in mind.
do you remember he also has a guest with him, a certain Eldar goddess.
Only one of three to really survive what the hell happened to the others.
Well,
Uh, and
then
really only
broken to
one of two
pieces.
to still be kind of aware completely.
Actually, no, there's four. There's Aisha, Nat, Kane, who's broken to pieces, Shigor, who's laughing, and Yaned, who's dead.
And who's only supposed to appear. I keep forgetting that they're kind of bringing her around. Yeah, that's basically the end of the Eldar, though.
Uh,
But yeah, unironically, he feeds Isha. He literally cooks for her. Unironically, the problem is that his cooking causes many illnesses.
and he does cook his own food. Um, does have guest beds, which is nice. You know,
I would
like
say
to help.
out of the four major entities of chaos, Nurgle's the most approachable, but he's also the most suffocating. Like, because
Uh,
once you have your bed, you're probably never leaving.
exactly. He'll feed you. Um, they're describing some more parts of the Hagen Gardens of Fushbald into a gray unclean one for his use of a choking plague to wipe out an orc infestation.
Oh yeah, that's another thing that Nurgle likes to play around with. He doesn't only focus on humans; he plays around with all species when he can.
And then onto
Unironically, he
the
cooks up illnesses designed to hit everything. Which includes Tyranids, by the way. He does play around with that. He probably finds them quite fascinating given how quickly they adapt.
yeah, but the problem is also not a lot of suffering.
Well, yeah, they're pretty brainless, unfortunately. Still good test subjects if you
Moving
can get your hands on one.
moving on to the servants of the Great Pox. So you have his demons.
Which there's the
Um,
most well-known, well, not the most well-known, but like the most obvious greater ones are the Great Unclean ones.
are said to look like him.
Yep, they're
You
they're
have
little
his
flesh balls that look like him.
Daemon Princes, um, and the mortal servants, or the mortals that just became. Uh,
And in fantasy, actually a Chaos Spawn who became one.
really,
Yes, Nurgle in fantasy does have a fairly unique Daemon Prince who legitimately was a Chaos Spawn before it ascended. I think he has a couple actually, because there's the three Plague Brothers, one of which was a spawn, and I think there's another
oh,
one besides that
not
one.
not demon princes. They're in Age of Sigmar. They're sort of like immortal, sort of eternal servants, I guess.
Could have swore they eventually ascended like during end times, but that could have just been me hallucinating.
They're specifically not.
He
They're not. They're
does
still
have
mortal.
one that is a spawn though. I know that.
I know one of the Glock
I
can
think.
once
Oh
he
yeah, I
beats you, he
remember.
does.
It's called Foul Spawn. It's called Foul Spawn. That's what it was.
Ah. Then you also have the Plague Bearers.
Those
Uh,
who were affected by the rot who died.
are very, very solemn or stubborn bunch because all they just do is catalog all the plagues. Contrasts with the Nurglings, more joyous. There are a few heralds of Nurgle that are at least a little bit more positive, such as the Sloppity Bile Piper
Yes, there is.
and
Speaking of which,
Scriven
is this
Pox
the book
Spoiler.
with the Chaos God creation rules, or you're remembering the original? I think you're remembering the original. What this does
That
instead,
is fantasy.
yep, that's the Tome of Corruption from Fantasy. This is the Tome of Decay. Because Black Crusade
The
actually wrote 4 books, which includes 4 splat ideas for adventures for any storyteller slash game master, which gives you ideas based around the main 4. This is Nurgle's book because I thought it was fitting since Nurgle gave us an interesting internet disease.
Then you have your beasts of Nurgle, which they just love to play with people, hug them, squeeze them, but
Well,
then they die,
let's be fair. Corn also likes his animals too. He has juggernauts and bloodhounds.
and they're more just rage-fueled monsters. These guys are very joyous. And the problem is, though, when a beast of Nurgle completely frustrated at the fact that all of his playthings dies, forms a cocoon and becomes a plague drone, a rotting creature that is, again, just very, uh, very angry and vengeful.
Yep,
And there's the Nurglings, those cute little buggers.
they're the least of his minions, but they're also the most numerous. And actually, because of how Nurgle works, he actually tends to like them more than some of his other demons.
They
Nurgle's
can
very
attack.
freewheeling with giving Nurglings.
I forget the name of the Great Unclean One, but there is one that was a Nurgling that then drank all of Nurgle's whatever concoction he was creating, and I guess Nurgle was impressed and made that Nurgling a Great Unclean One. Now the guy is tasked to sort of recreate that plague.
Yep. Unironically, Nurglings are they may be pretty weak by demon standards, but they are pretty liked by Nurgle. Destroying them or banishing them into Immaterium, you're more likely for him to notice and disapprove of you than the other 4 with their least.
So I do believe Games Workshop does offer a Nurgling plushie.
Well, yeah, because they're almost despite them being miniature copies of Nurgle, they can be quite cute.
Now moving on then to the Mortal Followers,
Which there's quite a few.
which in the previous millennium, one of the most important are the Space Marines.
Well,
There's
yeah,
obviously so
because
many.
they're so strong. Like they're so strong as an entity, and well, a lot of them have seen a lot of death themselves and decay.
And maybe tired of it. Perhaps they are themselves succumbing from an injury that cannot be treated, even by their own technology. So Nurgle comes and offers you a chance to fight and spread his love.
Although, let's be fair, technically Nurgle got his first ones by legitimately entrapping them.
Oh, Typhus
Unironically,
help.
yeah. Typhus may have
Yeah.
helped, but he did get them via entrapment. After that, though, he's gotten a little more flexible. He's very stubborn and very inflexible. But Nurgle, just because he's stayed and stuffy, doesn't mean he can't learn new tricks. Something he's really good with, and this is an oldie and goodie. Even Space Marines can feel despair, and he loves worming his way that way because despair is how he works. Each chaos entity, each chaos god, unironically has an aspect of emotion that they are best attuned to. Nurgle's is both resolution and resignment, but also despair. So a space marine who is essentially near close to snapping because, let's say, most of their chapter got wiped in a cold and callous brutal assault that did nothing. That's good. That's a good stomping ground for Nurgle. If the Marine doesn't fall into rage and they grow to hate the Empire for what they Imperium for what they did, yeah, that is a fertile ground for a new Plague Marine.
The Plague Marines are specific for
I mean, there are just straight up
those who
Chaos
are
Space Marines. I'm just giving an example.
those that completely diverted to Nurgle.
hmm
Uh,
But he works his way via despair. Mutants are also pretty common. And actually, this is another aspect of Nurgle that I would say kind of gets brushed under. He's almost in a way kind of like out of the Chaos Gods. I would say he's one of the better ones for outcasts. All of them have that as an aspect, but I'd say Nurgle, because of the his nature, is probably among one that probably gels well the most with mutants. Like, because he still likes you despite the fact that you got 3 arms, your skin constantly seems to leak acid, and you got you got a second mouth on your back. The other one who really likes them are Zinch, just because he thinks they look cool and he can make them look cooler by adding even more. What's
Squirrel
that, Sonny?
Killer
You got a
saying,
second mouth? You know what you need? You need a third one to level it out. Puts it on a belly button that's lower than the one on the back. But it's not exactly. It's asymmetry. You know what you also need? Boop puts feathers on you.
uh, Squirrel Killer did mention though that Clean when I talked about before, is saying that he's not tasked with finding that disease. He's doing it because he feels bad for drinking it, drinking that plague. Look it up. It's Kugoth.
Yep.
Kugoth, the plague father.
This isn't
Um,
purely a book about Chaos Space Marines. They do actually have non-Space Marine. It's just the way Black Crusade works. You have good odds of at least one of your players wanting to play a Chaos Space Marine because they're
then,
some of the
then they
most well-known. They're some of the most well-known soldiers dedicated to Chaos.
bring up the concept of the plague cult.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Nurgle also willingly works through subtlety sometimes, and cults are very popular because let's
and
say because on a lot of worlds, for example, Calixis, there's several worlds where just being a normal citizen is dog shit, and facing despair, it's not uncommon for someone to find salvation through sickness. It's similar to since we do talk about Vampire the Masquerade, and Vampire Requiem. It's actually somewhat similar to the Morbus strain of vampire and how they started.
very, very much so. As they do say, uh, death is ever present, as especially when a plague grips a region. Some who would worship Nurgle see the death that falls disease, misinterpret the plague rill, and instead form death cults instead of plague
Yep.
cults. The plague
Unironically,
cults are
Unironically, you gave a great example of a death cult earlier in the stream. What were their names again?
Let me see what the name would be. I forget the name of it.
But essentially, so death cults are a very common aspect in Warhammer
Yeah,
40k.
I found it.
Mhm.
Purge.
They're called the Purge. And them being a death cult is not surprising. Essentially, death cults became a major sub-religion that you can find among humankind ever since the Age of Strife. Basically, in the aftermath of complete societal collapse, there are those who legitimately worship death itself, and that can come in many forms. Some, quite a few of them, are actually essentially chaos cults, but not quite. Because, well, they could just be straight up chaos cults, but essentially, there is a reason why the Imperium unironically does audit death cults and only have a few legal ones. Mainly
So, I mean,
because
they're
too
just
many of them are unofficial and could legitimately just be a front for, say, a Kornate cult, or a Nurglite cult, or a Slaneshi cult who legitimately just uses the death as an excuse. Or just because they want to be the best damn killers ever. So yeah, plague cults are pretty popular. Quite a few of them become death cults because let's just say you are in an area where like 80% of your fellow men die. Some people, when faced with that, would go, what is the point of life but killings is for killings of others? Kill, 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 kill in these form. Nurglites traditionally don't particularly like this aspect, mainly because they forget about the renewal aspect of the Plague Father. Although, honestly, Papa's fine with it either way because it's still inevitability in its own way.
obviously, if everything is dead, there's no life that can be grown. And that's kind of the last thing he'd want.
So yeah, and it kind of also really shows that out of the four, Nurgle's very clearly one of the longest existing of the four, because he's essentially one of the primordial forces alongside Rage and Bloodshed. There's a reason why it is very commonly described that Nurgle is likely the oldest of all of the Chaos Gods, with Khorne being the second, or arguably the same age. Although there are some
When
GW descriptions that said that Khorne first woke up because Genghis Khan killed that many people. You'd have
well, it
thought
says
that
a
the An
warlord.
Lushan rebellion would have done that, but I don't know. You do you, games. Fun fact: Genghis Khan is actually a demon prince of Khorne.
It's not specifically. It's a
It's a,
warlord from the second century or second millennium. It could be anyone, but probably
it's pretty clearly Chinggis. Genghis Chinggis is the correct way to say it, but Genghis is more well known.
you gotta think. Then the emperor could probably realize that and fucked with Doombreed.
Oh, Khorne is actually older than Nurgle. That's also a reasonable description because Khorne also does reflect another aspect that people do forget about. This actually explains his hound-like being: survival of the fittest. He is also his most primordial form. He is tooth and claw, and the fight to survive. So, unironically, you could easily argue that Khorne is also the oldest, and GW doing that does also make sense. Um, in terms of origins, it's either Khorne or Nurgle. Khorne traditionally being originally, I think Nurgle was kind of supplanted him, and then from there it's Tzeentch, mainly because you need a thinking mind to actually be able to do the ideas that Tzeentch represents. And then, well, let's be fair, the Eldar fucked up.
Then again, also the Chaos Gods have always existed before they were born.
Yep.
That's the warp. Fucked up crazy.
And last but not least, there's a variety of Chaos warbands. These just kind of exist. They're comprised of essentially the core of these.
The
Like
main
they're his
armies.
least. Yeah, they are among his least. You will usually find some elements of cults would join them. They can be something as simple as a horde of underhive gangers who have just said fuck it and have joined in with the Plague Father, to an entire regiment of Imperial Guard who basically, after being sent through the equivalent of yeepers against, I don't know, against the orcs, said fuck it and have embraced embraced Nurgle, and the fact that they got spicy gassed. Actually, that could be a fun shit post. That could be a fun regiment idea for Lost and Damned, like a mockery of the Kriegers. Like you had a bunch of soldiers that were sent to essentially put down either a massive rebellion or they had to fight the Tyranids, and they got spicy gassed. So they look like a mockery of Kriegers.
The other example that's in the Dark Tide game is the Mobian Sixth, who have been fighting a long war, and simply because their deeds were neglected, they've been sort of left to the slaughter. They succumbed to Nurgle worship.
So let's see, the countless ills. There's a variety of them. Though they strive to embrace each day of life left to them to forestall the inevitable, those who serve Nurgle must accept their eventual death. They must also believe in the certainty of rebirth. The hope for something new and glorious is a great comfort that the Plague Father shared with them. And yeah, that's an interesting point of view. That's something that I think most people who start getting into this kind of miss.
Is that they know they're going to die, but they don't care because
Well, no,
from their death will spawn new life.
they also believe in rebirth, like it gives them a form of hope. There is also the rot itself is glorified. And the thing is, Nurgle, his blessing allows you to, it doesn't remove the illness, it just allows you to endure it. You're still sick with it.
As they say, few pledge themselves to Nurgle do so in the belief that he offers an easy path to power and glory. He does not promise increased influence, brutal strength, or hedonistic excess. Those who turn to him for aid are not seeking to make their dreams become reality, strike down those who stand in opposition, or to be adored by all who know them. Most mortals who find their way to Nurgle's foetid embrace wish only for an end to some sort of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
call to him to protect them from the ravages of disease. Uh, Even some who do not seek him out but are instead visited by one of his messengers and offer a bargain. No matter if they sought the gifts or they were found, these mortals have their doubts and fears cast aside. Finally, they are no longer caught in the paralyzing grip of despair and misery. Their afflictions, however, linger, and are usually joined by their blights.
Yep. And as for Champions of Decay, there's not many of those who worship Nurgle that actually get to hear.
See,
Those who
I
do, yeah.
do like this line though. For these newest of Nurgle's adopted children, it is if the morning fog has lifted and they see the world clearly with fresh eyes. They complained about their poxes and failing bodies. Selfish desires to change their fates had prevented them from realizing their true purpose. Rot, glorious rot, become a constant companion for a servant, the Lord of all,
Starting to
instructing
cut in
them.
and out. I think your microphone sensitivity is getting to the point where it's like cutting.
All right.
Glorious rot's infected the microphone. Your microphone worships Nurgle.
Hmm.
Oh no. But yeah, you see what I mean when I describe it almost like an opiate? There's a reason why the moment that a worshiper of Nurgle is cut from the Father, which can happen, that has been done, they immediately realize what the fuck they've done and begin screaming in agony from all of the things killing them at the same time.
Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Great.
So here's I actually like this old style art that they have of a champion of decay here. Pretty
Oh,
it's
that
pretty
is
cool.
Blanche. That is Blanche.
Blanche looks pretty cool. But yeah, champions of decay, there's not many that really uh are noticed by the Plague Father because again, he kind of sees you as maggots almost. But those who do, they tend to become more and more like him. And unironically, this is one of the weird things about playing Black Crusade. You could start as a literal bumbo, like some adept nerd who has garbage physical stats, right? Uh, if the gods notice you, though, you can get enough embellishments and improvements. Although you also can get deleterious mutations that actually screw you. That's the way of the game, buddy. That can make you actually get to Space Marine level bullshit. And beyond, if you're really lucky, you become a prince.
So moving on then to how does Nurgle fit within the Long War,
Yep.
the War of the Chaos Space Marines? And
So,
obviously, well, it's a long war. They are able to endure, and Nurgle endure more.
mhm. And the big thing about
Fact,
Nurgle is again, he represents decay. He unironically wants the game to stay long because the longer it goes, the more the Imperium of Man rots from within, decays, crumbles, breaks, as less and less understand how to run the system, until eventually collapse, and then renewal.
and from it, yep, and from it he will rise,
Unlike
reinforced.
Zinch, who constantly schemes of ways to get around it, Nurgle goes, I can wait another 10,000 years. It means nothing in the grand scheme of things. So they go on, and on, and on. And that's kind of Nurgle's point of view. Basically, he's willing to lose battles because he knows that at the end of the day, the war will win. Entropy will prevail. Which leads us into the Deathbringers. So Deathbringers, this chapter is specifically things that they added to Black Crusade, specifically for Nurglites. Each of the other books give
Or
stuff
more
for
like,
their respective cult.
or more like it's thematic.
Little
They
quiet.
include like,
Can barely hear you, man. So here's the thing. Of all of the Chaos Gods, Nurgle is the most involved with the plights of the mortal realm. Because again, he represents disease and decay. Every living thing endures his ministrations at some point before the end. And what this does it introduces entirely new traitor legions to the hordes that dwell within. For example, they fully stat out Plague Marines. This allows you to play them. You can be a veteran of the Long War, whose entire goal is to just destroy the Imperium. They have a Tech Marine, a World Sorcerer King, Death Priest of the Mire, and Plaguemeister. The only thing I will complain about is I do think too many of the options they offer are purely for Space Marines. It's my only complaint. I feel like you could have done a Dark Mechanicum member here. You get what I mean? Can't hear you. What? Oh no, Nurgle gave his microphone laryngitis. Also, the archetypes are designated for more advanced players, so they represent powerful veterans of chaos. So, as a result, this is something that you should think about before handing it off to your players. Hey there, Jim. So basically, okay, that makes a lot more sense. These are designed for Chaos Space Marine archetypes introduced in this chapter are equivalent to a beginning Chaos Space Marine character with an extra 3,600 experience points. Human characters are all roughly equivalent to that, but with 4,600. So these are kind of more like for late game scenarios. Okay. Is it Plaguemeister Dark Mechanicum? It is an apothecary, so it is entirely possible. You are right, Reynold. That's a good catch. Have you fixed your mic yet?
oh,
Nope, still dead
No.
quiet. At the edge of despair. So, the Imperium of Man is the larger endeavor in humanity's long and largely forgotten history. For 10,000 years since the dark days of the Imperium of Man have endured, despite the efforts of innumerable heretics, renegades, and vile Xenos who seek to erode its authority. However, beneath its mighty facade, the Imperium stands on the brink of collapse. This is basically the Long War concept. So they describe the Death Guard right here, and yeah, basically in short, they were one of the original founding legions. They were led by Mortarion, who essentially grew up in a horrible, toxic shithole world, murdered a bunch of alien death cultists who ruled them as gods, except for his pops, who he couldn't do because he got too poisoned. Big E did it for him. He hated Big E ever since. Did his job pretty darn good, although he basically sent his guys to die via meat grinder method. Until eventually he gets trapped in a ship and Typhus tells him, dude, you should talk to the flies. And he talks to the flies, and the flies are like, yo, bro, don't worry, we got you, fam. And yeah, they all realized, rot, glorious rot. Besides Death Guard, because these are kind of the most. Oh my god! Oh no! I think your microphone is genuinely sick, because that was deafening. Can you
Yeah,
talk? Oh,
you guys hear me?
very much so, to the point where it's destroying your bleed filter.
Yeah, I had to actually take the microphone out. I'm using the computer.
All right, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of fiddly widdly. The microphone is an actual Chaos Worshipper. That's the new canon for Scum. Imsit's microphone is a proud Chaos Worshipper, probably Zinchian, given that it's intentionally screwing with everything on the Nurgle book.
Let me try something else.
I have lowered my audio by a lot. That should help, actually. Oh. I am all alone. Oh no. Oh man. So besides the Death Guard, there's also the Black Legion. Quite a few of Horus's group did decide to join Papa Nurgle. They kind of ultimately started to rally around their father Horus, but when he got destroyed on every level humanly possible, to the point where he doesn't exist no more, some of them basically decided to join here. I believe that what in this case the Plague Marines you're going to see are Death Guard, and it's pretty clear that the Long War veterans are going to be Black Legions, because the Black Legion legit fucking hates the Imperium.
Yeah, pretty much so.
That's somewhat better. We'll work with it. Your microphone is a secret.
This is the
worshiper.
phone. I'm gonna have to figure out what's with the microphone, but hopefully this will do.
The microphone's a worshiper of Tzeentch, or a proto man of iron. That's new canon. That's new head canon. So on top of that, there's also the Iron Warriors, who is led by the great petulant manchild Perturabo, creator of wonders, but constantly seething, but being too would it be social geek fallacy or just pure autistic to just say, hey, Dad, I fucking hate doing the trench work all the fucking time?
Well, you see, we saw what happened when one of his sons did things that he didn't like. And that created the word bearers.
Here's the difference, though. That was after multiple times of refusing to bow down to Daddy. Because he kept doing it, remember?
Yeah. But still, I mean, I'm pretty sure
I'm
actually
going with social geek fallacy and or autism. Probably both, let's be fair.
there is some theory that he actually is autistic.
we're going with autism. Basically, the 10,000 years of him being a monstrous demon prince is just him throwing a massive tantrum. Actually, wait, no, I think I figured it out. Perturabo is the Emperor's own interpretation of this one guy from Milwaukee who is known as the Rage Pig and claimed to be a creative. Did the Emperor create Perturabo an image of Patrick? Who knows?
Well, the thing is, does Patrick normally kill off 10% of his followers?
I mean, if he ignores criticism and is actively abusive to people who try to offer him life advice. So maybe?
Well, here's the other thing. Does he play miniature war games?
I wouldn't be surprised he plays with toys.
Because actually in the Horus Heresy, it turns out that the Iron Warriors, in their free time, played the Siege of Terra. Perturabo even has like a miniature Imperial Titan he works on. The Iron Warriors are just Warhammer players.
Enjoy prison, Emperor. I'm just now envisioning Patrick Tomlinson
Well, that
as
actually makes
Perturabo.
sense.
That's beautiful.
Well, remember the Iron Cage incident. Enjoy prison, Rogaldorn.
Enjoy prison, Rogaldorn. He calls Rogel his stalker.
No, Praetorian. You will not escape my siege work. I did not find Malcador insightful.
Oh my god,
Oh,
that's
actually, no, this also
hilarious.
makes sense because Perturabo did kill his sister.
Yup.
So he has anger issues.
I'm unironically just envisioning Rogel Dorn in the style of Alphabusa, intentionally Fox calling Perturabo in the style of one of his trolls. In the style of one of Patrick's trolls. Hello, brother. I have come here to make fun of your weight once more. I love it.
Hey, Gene Seed.
I can't stop laughing. Oh my god. So yeah, after the War Master's defeat, the Iron Warriors fled, and they are responsible for some of the greatest war crimes out in the entire universe. Well, at least known universe.
And one of the greatest and horrifying atrocities to create new Space Marines.
Oh yeah, they created
Monkey
female Space
Lava.
Marines. Yeah, they created female Space Marines. It wasn't pretty.
But they're not Space Marines. They're just Gene Seed incubators.
Yep.
And Marine incubators.
You know, this also further establishes that Perturabo is actually Patrick 2.0 because of how he describes his second wife. Remember?
Well, the thing is, this was all made by one Chaos Space Marine who is a combination of both Iron Warrior and Imperial Fist Gene Seed.
That sounds dumb.
Now there's hybrid chapters out there.
No, I'm aware of that, but that sounds kind of dumb.
Well, he's also hated by a lot of the Iron Warriors, so it's a plucky underdog story of guys who would eat the underdog for breakfast.
OC character. Do not steal, please.
No, this is from the Iron Warriors book series. It's one of the first Chaos book series.
No, I'm aware, but I'm still calling it fan fiction. Please do not steal.
He also loses.
Good.
By the Ultramarines.
So forgive me if I'm mistaken. Perturabo has just spent like 10,000 years playing Minecraft alone in his bedroom, right? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
I think he stepped out once or twice, but I mean, listen, there's been about 2 Primarchs that have stepped out multiple times, and they both get their shit kicked in.
I love the mental image of it's Perturabo. He spends his time on 40k version of Twitter. You know, like just typing and shit posting, enjoy prison, stalker. To Dorn's debt to Imperial Fist accounts who keep making fun of him.
What's the new guy? There's some new demon print. Oh, Vashtor. He's just shitting at Vashtor, who's trying to also become a actual god of chaos. It's machines.
I mean, Hanzo being a decent character is fine and all. It feels when you describe something as half of two different entire gene seeds, it has strong fanfiction.net character energy to me. It just feels like something that did not need to be. Speaking of which, hey, here's a Space Marine who has a bad case of the ulcers. So yeah, these are these are Space Marines who are completely dedicated to the Plague Father.
And that is actually using the old design of the Plague Marines, the metal ones,
Yep.
where it was just the body, the hat, and the head that was different from the rest of the Chaos Space Marine body. Putting those together was a bitch, especially for the Thousand Suns.
And out of all Chaos Space Marines, these are probably the most horrifying to take out, just because it takes forever to actually take them out. It is a bitch to put any one of these down. So they actually stat out how a Plague Marine would be designed. You get the following characteristic bonuses. You get starting skills, talents, and some special abilities.
Minus 10 agility and plus 10 toughness.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And they get abominable physiology, hideous resilience, and infectious miasma.
Well, yeah, because Plague Marines unironically shit out a variety of plagues from their bodies.
Then they give examples of, I guess, Plague Marine groups. The Germinatorus, mock apothecaries that, like carrion feeders, prowl the battlefield, plundering the gene seed from any fallen trait or space they can find and infecting them with viscous fluids that ooze from their rotting innards to ensure the propagation of Nurgle's putrefying influence.
Essentially turning them into landmines. Forsaken Host is that the Forsaken Host, a solitary survivor of a battle which scoured an entire planet of life. The host of fat flies accompanies him. And then there's the Emissaries of the Wasting Death. These Plague Marines are particularly feared because they essentially give you prion diseases. Because there is actually a real life sickness that is wasting death. You see it in deer. It's called wasting disease. It's a type of misfolded protein that slowly destroys your nervous system. Also related to it is known as mad cow disease or Jacobsen-Kreugs disease. Also related, Kuru. Also related, fatal familial insomnia, where you literally can't sleep.
Oh, that is an interesting Nurgle plague.
I mean, the wasting death is probably not a prion disease, but doesn't that sound like something Nurgle would play with? Because prion diseases are nasty. They take years to manifest.
But no, I have an idea of.
And on top of that, it takes hot fire to destroy them because these proteins are resistant to heats that would kill bacteria and viruses.
But no, I have an idea. It is a Night Lord's Nurgle-aligned group that cause psychic manifestations of insomnia. At the survivors, completely paranoid, die by not sleeping.
Which can happen. That is literally how the worst part of fatal familial insomnia is you don't know you have it. It actually manifests over years. You only figure out if you have it once you hit your 30s. Thankfully, it seems to have only infected, I believe, 12 to 15 different families.
Oh, it's a genetic lineage?
Familial. It's called fatal familial for a reason.
Oof.
But it's Nurgle. It's fine. You can make it an actual plague of the mind. So the veteran
But then
of the
next,
Long War is a black. It's very clearly a Black Legion member, or actually maybe.
it can be anything, but most associated would be the Black Legion because they're entirely dedicated to perpetuating the war against the Imperium. They don't give a shit about whatever the gods want or their own personal vendettas. They are dedicated to fighting the Imperium and destroying it.
Yep, and because of that, they have literally no standards for who they ally with. The bonuses you get out of this are +5 willpower, weapon skill, or ballistic skill. And obviously, since you're playing Black Crusade, you get corruption points and infamy. And as for their special abilities, the Eternal Enemy. They represent the greatest of the Imperium's fear. And what this does, you select your starting alignment and character creation, then acquires a special ability and a single piece of equipment from any other Chaos Space Marine archetype. There's also Abhorrence Unchained, which, if you're wondering how this works, whenever a veteran of the Long War slays a foe for whom he has the associated hatred talent, you make an ordinary infamy test. If he succeeds, he gains Fear 2 against that type of foe. Which means that you can essentially clap an entire unit by yourself if you're in the right situation. Wonder whether there's any Nurglish digital viruses out in the galaxy. Oh yeah, that could be an interesting. Again, people talk about the biological, but with Nurgle, you can kind of play around with any form of illness if you think about it.
That actually happened. The Death Guard invaded Metallica and infected the planet with a plague. I think they're working on curing it, but the scars still remain.
Also, Squirrel Killer does explain why prion diseases are terrifying. So yeah, do you want to know the heat that actually destroys those proteins completely? The melting point of iron.
Oh, so you're just cooking a brain at that point.
Yeah, you can't fix that. You literally can't fix that.
I mean, unless you can maybe get a laser or something like that that specifically targets the prion. But you're probably doing damage to the body in some way.
Warp smithing, which is a Nurglite variant of, well, not just Nurglite, it's a chaos version of
yeah,
Tech Marine.
They are not Nurglite.
They're chaos Tech Marines.
But instead of
and they're Iron
worshipping,
Warriors, obviously.
Iron Warriors line, but they can be of any background. They very much, because they don't have much access to traditional technology, they are willing to manipulate the demonic with the machine. So they're responsible for daemon engines. A lot of them.
Not only daemon engines, but unironically, because of how the warp works, if you don't have the machinery, you can just kind of smash a demon into the shape of a machine. Literally, you use that axe to beat a demon into what you need it to look like.
But they are still also adept at cursing technology and manipulating it.
Well, because they are skilled with real-life machinery. It's just they don't have to follow rules. You see, science is more of an art than it is, routine. What's that? I'm missing half of the pieces in this device to make it work. Well, fuck that. Just shove a demon in it. Oh, I need to get into this computer. Oh, well, don't worry. You're gonna shove a demon into it? No, dumbass. And he pulls out his mechadendrite and hacks it using a virus. What do you think? What do you think I'm at? What do you think I am? A mere magic wielder?
It actually reminds me. I think it was 8th edition. The Master of Possession, who was, instead of binding demons to machines, binding demons to living things, had a psychic power in which you could just take hit points from a warsmith and transfer it to him or to another unit. A completely limited power, but still funny to show the rivalry.
Also, yeah, funnily enough, these aren't warpsmiths, despite their association with demon engines. Reynold has a very good point. Psychers and mechs from the Tome of Fate do this better, which I think is kind of hilarious. No, I think you're probably correct on this. Because
I mean, they might be, but they might be more adept at the binding aspect. They're adept. They have probably limited capacity, but instead they have more of an emphasis on technology itself.
Because
I mean,
the
they have
Iron
the ability.
Warriors were well known for that.
They have the binary curse, which allows them for a half action may spend an infamy point to cause a weapon to overheat or become unbalanced until the end of the encounter.
Yep. Basically, they can insert viral code into your device.
Even if it is simply just a knife.
Also, unironically, one of the fun things about warpsmiths are you could actually have them make bootleg Men of Iron. Because abominable intelligences don't really like. Why do you care about that rule anymore?
Exactly.
So they often will have cybernetic machine servants, although it's more likely servitors. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. And last but not least, they do have the Mechamorphosis, which basically, I think Tome of Fate they're better at putting demons into it, but these are the guys that turn them into the most effective demon engine that you can get. Because they get a 20 bonus to the binding ritual. Then there's, oh god, look at the Writhing World Sorcerer King. That's fucking awesome. Look at that horrible thing.
It's got like a worm in its stomach and as its tail or whatever it
Oh
is.
no, those are tapeworms that have been mutated by Nurgle, I think.
So these ones are specific to the region that the game takes place in, called the Screaming Vortex. It's a warp storm that's between the Holistic Sector, which is the Dark Heresy setting, and the Kronos Expanse, which is the Rogue Trader setting. So these guys are from the Writhing world, a primitive human inhabitants wander amidst continental-sized tendrils of undulating flesh beneath the merciless rule of the great Biomancer lords.
Yep.
This feels like some out of Conan.
It's really cool, and I like it. So
So
these are extremely skilled sorcerers, very knowledgeable on the art of dark magics. What you get is toughness boost, an intelligence boost, willpower boost, 1d10 plus 15 corruption points, because seriously, look at this motherfucker. Look at him. Do you not understand why he has such a high corruption starting trait? So their abilities
there's
are Verminous Necromancers.
So they have Psychers. They count as Psi rating as one higher to manifest Nurgle aligned powers.
Yep.
They have the Worm Masters Supreme. So they basically take the parasites in their body and make it into some gestalt creature that follows his orders. They get to make a worm golem.
Or turn someone into a worm golem. Really
They give it
cool
as
idea.
examples. They give it examples like the Gurgan Might, creation of ancient and esoteric sorcerer king. This myropod citadel ceaselessly tunnels beneath the planet's segmented exterior, instigating deadly convulsions and emerging at random to feed before quickly scrabbling beneath the slimy, quivering surface. Oh, this isn't actually a
It's an
sorcerer king
organic fortress.
that the sorcerer king created.
Yep.
And then you have
The Leech King.
the I was going to go next with the
the
Death Priests of the Mire.
Not as
This is
cool as the worm guys, but these are pretty neat.
So they come from a barren and blighted planet. They fight amongst photo pools of festering muck and decaying vegetation. So playing one, they are hardy warriors who feed on the bodies of their victims in order to nourish the parasites, diseases, and other foul poxes in their flesh.
They literally should be dead, but for the fact it's in the warp and Nurgle's keeping them alive. Yeah.
They hunt. Their unholy duty is to hunt down so-called pyruns, clean ones, and devour them. So they're cannibalistic death priests.
Yep. As for what you get +5 strength, +5 weapon skill or perception, a boost of toughness, and as for their special abilities, contaminated blades. Their weapons are often smeared with the remnants of their recent kills. What this does, you can make a routine survival test to coat your melee weapons with the filth as a suitable source. They now become toxic, corrosive, or irradiated, which does its own forms of damage. Oh, and also you get the ability to eat the dead. You gain unnatural toughness for doing this. 1d5, which is pretty impressive.
And one of the examples they give is the brood kind. A pack of death priests find some nurglings. One of them, they all kill each other, and the survivors are now hosts for these imps.
Yep. And then
Everyone loves the nurglings.
and here's a plague meister. So
He looks AI generated.
he's not
Even though
though.
it came out 10 years before, but it looks AI generated.
He's not though.
Oh, my.
Someone just made this as an art piece, and what probably happened was the cauldron was put in there via Photoshop, but no, this was just all drawn.
And the quote says, "Every biological system is prone to failure and eventual cessation, such is the fate of all flesh. I, however, desire a much more intriguing conclusion from such unspoilt specimens."
I mean, by this logic, machinery is more prone to fucking up and glitching out, right?
So,
See, a human can eat 5 pounds of dirt and do fine. A robot hand can get 5 pounds of dirt and have a seizure and break itself.
the Plague Meister believe that Nurgle's greatest achievement is not death, but rather the putrescent afflictions that preserve his servants in a state of deathless entropy. And they'd be right.
Oh, yeah,
So,
that's actually interesting in a what the fuck kind of way.
so they get the ability to make different boons, different potions, which will infect you with a disease.
So they're basically they're basically just war crimes specialists.
And very much focused on Nurgle's holy number, 7. Such as on the boons table here, you have to roll 7 and roll again. If you get a 7, you become possessed by a plague bearer of Nurgle.
Yep.
And if not, you increase the character's toughness.
Yep.
That's good.
Also, if you are wondering, most of these plague meisters are essentially heretics.
Heretics they have to be some kind of biological specialist, so hence.
They're part of
And
the
also
Ordo Biologus, yeah.
They probably also need to replace a lot of their body parts because they probably have withered away on contact with the various plagues.
Yep. So what does the Plague Meister get? You get plus 10 intelligence, plus 5 toughness, and as for their special abilities, the Wretched Tally. Plague Meisters take immense joy in studying and cataloging the numerous pestilence and poxes. What this means is you take a routine awareness check as a free action to identify and catalog a creature, weapon, ailment, or sorcery that bears the mark. You also gain a bonus to common lore, forbidden lore, and scholastic lore tests that involve them. There's also Malevolent Generosity. When you remove damage from a target with the Decay skill, you can spend an infamy point to remove additional damage equal to his intelligence bonus and any critical effects. However, any character healed this way has to make a toughness check. If you fail, that's where the boons of the Plague God come around and you get possessed by a fucking Plague Bearer.
As he gives you needles covered in something that's writhing and moving.
Aren't Black Crusade books cool? They're pretty neat. I will say one of the weaknesses of the classes in Tome of Decay is that they're very clearly designed for advanced characters. I also feel like they put a little too much into Space Marines, but honestly, Iron Warriors getting reps in the form of Warsmiths is really cool, so I'm not going to complain. Look, people don't like drawing them construction lion-ass motherfuckers.
Yeah, no one likes to do the stripes. But
also Plague Meisters are pretty cool. I like them.
You do have your various
They have a bunch
new
of new weapons, which the only thing we're gonna touch on here are the weapon qualities they introduce in this book, which are corrosive, decay, and irradiated. Corrosive qualities, the armor points of any armor worn by that in the hit location is reduced by 1d10 points. If it goes to below 0, you take damage equal to the amount by the corrosive effect. So these guys can chew through your armor pretty casually.
Decay is quite interesting. So if your opponent suffers critical damage, you must take a challenging toughness test with a penalty equal to 10 times X or perish.
Reminder that the plague folk of Mire can just do this casually.
It is the classic save or die.
Yep. And last but not least, irradiated. You have to make a challenging toughness test with the penalty equal to 10 times the exit result. So in this case, it would be 2, so 20, or suffer 2d10 toughness damage, which can kill you if you have low toughness or you've been damaged already.
Yeah, these things are nasty.
So, like I said, I don't. They have a variety of new weapons in here, but I feel like we probably shouldn't show them off.
I do want at least the special ammunition, just because blood
enough.
rot. It is
Also
a bullet.
diseases. Let's be fair. Diseases we're probably going to cover.
Yeah, it is heavy bolter rounds filled with the noxious brew of the foul swarm grenades.
Which, if you're wondering what a foul swarm grenade, it's in grenades. Foul swarm grenades are a concoction whose true nature is known only to those of the plague meisters of the Screaming Vortex. Unironically, it is a condensed biological weapon. So, a blood rot round is a bolter which is designed to explode, only instead of the explosive within, it's just enough to burst open so you get infected with whatever the fuck's in a foul swarm grenade.
And it creates smoke.
Which is
So
also filled with the noxious, yeah.
So not only are you most likely missing a limb, you can't see.
Oh no, it's even worse than that, because you also have corrosive qualities, a corrosive 3, which, have fun!
And then the scourge shells, which are shells filled with toxins.
Yep.
And you have cybernetic horrors.
Which, again, probably not going to go into details for that, because it's pretty mundane. Diseases, though.
You have Death's Grasp. Character infected cannot remove levels of fatigue. And whenever they gain a level of fatigue, the other characters are also exposed to the disease.
Yep.
When the character slips into unconsciousness, they die.
Yep.
That is... Oh, but characters dedicated to Nurgle can carry this disease, but can still remove levels of fatigue as normal while infected. Which means you don't suffer any penalties, but everybody else around you does.
Yup. Then there's
That's...
Feeble.
Yep.
What this were, it slowly corrodes your bones in the dust. It's hyper osteoporosis. You suffer 1d5 agility damage each time you take a full actions or 2 half actions during one of their turns, or whenever they take strenuous actions during narrative time. Characters dedicated to Nurgle suffer the effects of the disease as normal, although they don't really see it as suffering. Festering Shroud. It's an insidious blight that was first encountered by void ship crews. Characters infested by this constantly emit an unnatural green fog that spreads around him in a 7-meter cloud. At the end of each 24-hour period, if they have the disease, you have to make a challenging toughness check. If he fails, his flesh putrefies, collapsing in on itself in a vile torrent. Roll 1d5 on a randomly determined impact critical effect table, which, critical effect table, oh boy. Oh,
yeah,
oh boy.
These can range from, that's going to leave a nasty permanent scar and a limb removal, to your head blows up and it actually causes people to run away in fear.
And they're very descriptive on what the hell happens to you. Yeah. So you roll on that, adding +1 to the roll for every degree of failure you scored on the test beyond 1. And then you apply the result. Oh, by the way, whenever someone enters this cloud, they have to make a routine toughness test or contract the disease. Characters dedicated to Nurgle can carry this disease, but don't suffer any of the problems of it, other than the, other than the noxious cloud. Oh, and also your flesh turning putrescent. Nurgle's Breath, sometimes seen as a boon, Nurgle's Breath is popular among plague cults for the ability to propagate quickly. So here's the way it works. You gain a new attack with the following profile. It has the effects of a pistol, single shot, does 2d10 energy, or I think it's energy or explosive. I think it's explosive.
The E is, I believe,
Penetration of 2.
I believe it is energy.
Energy. Corrosive spray in toxic rank 2. The attack can't jam, but if the character ever rolls 2 results of 7, he immediately explodes and dies.
Halitosis is unbecoming.
Oh, and on top of that, each character within 3d10 meters suffers an immediate hit from the weapon.
And anyone who fails contracts it.
Yep. So this could be a wild ride. You can actually just straight up kill your character by using it.
Actually, it reminds me of was it the Onions SpongeBob episode when he's just talking to people and everyone runs away from his breath. Also, because he's ugly and proud.
That does feel like a Slaaneshi recruitment video if you think about it.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
So there's rites and rituals that we can also hypothetically cover, but let's. I think we should probably move on since.
Yeah, because they do have a forging the daemon engines.
Let's at least look at that. These are pretty cool.
So,
well, I mean, it makes sense. They introduced warp smiths in here, and unironically, I would say if you may not necessarily be a big Nurglite fan, at the very least get it just because of the warp smith.
So you need obviously knowledge to create it, a suitable shell, either salvaged or constructed, such as maybe a tank transport or a mundane car. Wait a minute, what was that Stephen King book about the possessed car?
Which one? Because there's
The one that
trucks, and then there's Christine.
Christine, that's it. We're making Christine.
You say that, but unironically, I kind of like the mental image of a Slaaneshi heretic who is dressed like a 50s greaser talking to a gravity car that he named Christine. Can't you see it?
I can see it.
I love
different gain different abilities. Obviously, then you need new weapons, and then you need to choose your demon.
Oh, yeah, also new trait, Daemon Forge. A fire burns at the heart of the Daemon engine, roaring for it to lash out. Once per encounter, you can re-roll a damage in its entirety. Also,
So
yeah, it's a Daemon engine.
Find the daemon, bind it, and then based on its traits, it gets different abilities. But I do like it also includes undivided.
Yep, it could be something like a Hellcaster, Hellram, Slaughterer, Limb, Dire, Harpoon, or a Star of Chaos, because you can get bonuses. You can get bonuses. So they also go into all of these traits, and like I said, I really would, even if you're not necessarily a big fan of Plaguefather stuff, like if you're gonna play a Black Crusade, unironically, this is pretty cool though, just if you want to make Daemon engines, because they explain what each of these do. So possessed heretics. So here's the thing: you can willingly get possessed,
As you
or
should.
unwillingly. If you're wondering how this works, you can invite the daemon. The effects of possession, many heretics embrace the possession as a quick path to power, because you gain a lot of strength, fortitude, and a number of unnatural abilities But the thing is, you're still essentially a meat puppet.
They do say when selecting the demon, it should generally be a lesser demon or demonic beasts. Heralds, great demons, and demon princes can possess mortals, but their essence can scarcely be contained by mortal shells.
Yeah.
So apply appropriate penalties. I am imagining then you get possessed by a beast of Nurgle and you become more like a hound, like a loyal puppy.
You're thinking that, but I like the idea of you run into this kind of fat, sweaty, disgusting guy covered in scars, and he just screams, "We are legion, for we are many," and then he just begins vomiting out a fuckload of Nurglings who all begin dancing, including the body that just is on the floor convulsing in his own dance.
That's just their dance routine. It's not a
Like,
it's just a dance routine that they made up. It gets lonely.
do you like the idea though of like this really fat guy that's filled with like a bunch of Nurglings, and they do a fucking dance routine after he vomits out a random assortment of them to attack you with them?
I'm imagining then just a on the side there's like a little band of Nurglings and they're stringing a guitar, you know, playing a saxophone or something like that.
Yeah, and they're like made out of human flesh that's partially decomposing. 75 Nurglings in a neckbeard. Yeah, something like that. So the thing about being possessed is you're essentially body sharing. If you become possessed as a ritual of possession, as is usually the case, the ritual used to initially summon the demon determines its type. And here's some demonic characteristics that you get out of this. It is genuinely a quick way to gain power. Um, you gain a lot of neat abilities, but again, you're kind of share bunking your body. You're not in full control.
In fact, they do say to roleplay it as almost separate personalities. If you've ever read the first Heretic, do what Argyltal. Argyltal might be the best way to do it, although make it more hostile.
Another way you could do it is
Because
one I always go to is actually Two-Face from Batman, but emphasize the personalities in between each other. Only one of you're both not good. It's just both of you have different ideas. Another good example is actually Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
oh yeah,
Andy Serkis, like channel Andy Serkis, but not like full Gollum voice, but like the performance where you both are trying to argue on figuring out what you want to do. Not always. Sometimes you both agree, but sometimes you're gonna want to do something, or the demon's gonna want to do something, and you just, sorry, buddy, Damon's in control now because you lost the power struggle. You're doing the thing you don't want to do.
so on to then the Lords of Entropy. Take a look at that Nurgle Demon Prince trying to read.
Well, also no, they also mentioned Final Destiny. So a possessed heretic is actually it's a cheap path to power, but the problem is when you reach 100 corruption points, you cannot become a prince. You don't become a spawn either. Instead, the demon just completely takes over. You're just fucked. Sorry, buddy.
Well, you have a constant battle.
Not really. You're not really gonna win from that one. The benefit though is you do get to play the demon itself for a little bit until going back. Fun Frank, kidnap a Cornet and shove a Slaneshi Daemon into the. That's actually a fun character concept right there. Do you like it? I do. I think it's pretty great.
Oh no, and then you make it a you make the demon a tsundere.
No, what I'm envisioning is you got this big Norskin berserker kind of motherfucker, tall, blonde hair, fucking blue eyes, fucking tattoos around the body and neck. But that is not what the Slaneshi style likes.
just wakes up one day. Why do I have all these scars on my body?
No, you're going too hardcore. I think the maximum shitpost would be Genki Battle Girl Snake Monster. You like it?
But I'm also imagining it as a fun prank. The changeling does that. The source, you have a sorcerer come in, just I'm going to help you, increase your power. Does the ritual, turns into the changeling, fucks off,
No
and then
explanation.
you realize, oh, there's a Slanesh and a corn body. This is going to be fun. I mean, the changeling is the guy who created the demonic whoopee cushion. Put a bunch of Nurgle on top of Corn's throne, so obviously it made a big noise when he stepped on it or sat on it.
Unironically, Femboy Berserker was kind of the initial shitpost concept, only with a bit more Cenobite thrown in and a little more serpent motif thrown in. Fallen Space Wolf trying to get his shit together is also a really fun concept for that. Another take you could do with the Slaneshi one is unironically you just kind of go with like as you mentioned the scars.
And then you just keep looking down the body and you realize, oh, I'm missing that now.
No, but because you're a coronate, you're like good.
No more distractions.
Like I said, you could do some fun concepts with this. Tome of Decay, unironically, has more than enough in it that I'm going to preemptively recommend it.
I recommend honestly, the entirety of Fantasy Flight's line. They're full of lore, and they capture it to a T that it makes the other games that have come out, like was it Wrath and Glory, Imperium Maledictum, pale. The only thing with Maledictum is that you can play as a character from any organization.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a bunch of navigators, go ahead.
Unironically, this is if you ever want someone to actually maybe get interested in 40k, and you know that they're not much of a minis guy, this is one of the best ways to do it. That or have them play any of the first two Dawn of War games. And from what I understand, 3 ain't too bad. It's just kind of crappy by comparison.
It's not, from what I heard, not really good.
Oh, it's just bad. Okay. I heard it was just mediocre. Like I thought it was like 6 out of 10.
It's more on the mediocre side, but it's just, I think because of that and because of the success of the other Dawn of Wars,
by comparison, it has the same faults as well, no, that's a bit of an insult to Dawn of War 3. It's not as bad as Myth 3 was to the Wolf Age. But yeah, Lords of Entropy. I do love that the Great Unclean One is attempting to read and is very No, he knows how to read. He's just disgusted by what the Inquisition book is talking about. I am personally offended that what they done think about what we do. We're more than that.
They call Nurgle a third-rate demon?
I'll have you know that he's the first and greatest of them all. Been around since the beginning of things, and will be here when the end of things come.
Oh no, wait, no. It's like, why do they spell Nurgle with an E?
They spell it wrong every time. It annoys me.
They claim it's some ancient god from Terra. No, it's not. Also, that's a model. That Demon Prince, they made a specific one. I don't think it's for sale anymore, but they did make a specific Nurgle Demon Prince.
And again, Apotheosis, the whole point of Black Crusade, not the whole point, but one of the major goals is to become one. Your character has to retire when your heretic reaches 100 corruption points. However, the GM's permission, a heretic who meets the requirements can ascend to become a Daemon Prince and continue play as a potent entity using the rules in this section. So here's something Tome of Decay and all of the other tomes do, I think, as well. They essentially tell you, Hey, you know your Black Crusade game? Well, you know how some of your guys made it to be Daemon Princehood? This is what you can do if you still want to play as them. So they go into details about what you got, what you do. They tell you about what each of the demon princes are like, what their gear is, the gifts of the gods, and advancing as a daemon prince. You use favor to advance, and you gain favor by doing things for them that benefits them. So becoming a daemon prince is a fundamental change to any heretic. So yeah, you're way beyond anything now. It'll be unlike any character a player might control in Black Crusade. Even the most mutated Chaos Space Marine is still nothing compared to a prince. Although a Daemon Prince might possess many of the convictions and desires they had in mortal life, its perception is now completely beyond the understanding of any mortal.
You remember when we were talking about Amber? I was saying this is how you'd play as a demon prince.
Don't you like how Fantasy Flight games did this? Well, I mean, not before, because Amber came out way before then. But they're like, yeah, you want to play a godlike entity? Here's how you can do it here.
In a more mechanically focused way. Like this, you're still in the mortal plane. I do think maybe some sort of diceless thing would be fun for a for like in the warp.
Also, another fun thing as a Daemon Prince is, you know those compacts, and you can actually stage your own rituals and create them. Hell, you can even you could do a cult management simulator with these guys. So, Daemon Prince is another heretics. Daemon Princes pose challenges for players in the GM as part of a group of heretics, because you're a fucking Demon Prince. You are, especially if you're playing in a primarily Nurglite warband or any Chaos God warband or unaligned, you existing invites worship, terror, and fear. So, in scenarios like this, they recommend that you play around through indirect means. And here's the thing, you're not focused on the flesh world that much no more. You're focused on the great game between other powers, primarily between your rivals in the demon realms in the Imperium. And, because you became a Daemon Prince, you can't really be killed anymore. You can be banished, and you'll be out of commission for a while, but you don't die. You come back.
Technically, you can be killed. Lore-wise, you can be.
It's difficult, though. Also, if you're wondering, the equivalent of that is if you try to come back and you don't have sufficient infamy to sacrifice, or the loss of infamy reduce it to 0, it's banished to the warp for a long time.
So I mean, if you are playing a game that is going to be lasting hundreds of years, maybe they can come back.
But that's not likely. So some dark endowments you got, they actually start with unaligned gifts. So all Daemon Princes swear loyalty to one of the dark gods, but even the most diametrically opposed princes might exhibit characteristics.
So these are less unaligned and more just generic.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone can get a demon weapon, everyone can get flight. But the specific stuff, like
Khorne, you get things like Adorned in Brass. You can get Favor, the Lord of War, an Obsidian Star. For Slaanesh, you get stuff like the Lord of Vivacity, Siren's Call. For Nurgle, since this is the Tome of Decay, I'm willing to read these into a little more depths. They only got they got a few. Death's Hand. One of the Daemon Prince's hands swells and drips with all manner of fetid liquids, gases, and slimes. You gain a weapon with the listed profile. Death's Hand cannot be disarmed or destroyed. It does not prevent the hand from performing other tasks. You also can get something like Lord of Decay. You select a number of talents and traits equal to your current toughness bonus, including unnatural toughness, but none of the bonuses from demonic traits. From the following: Baleful Dirge, Corpus Conversion. Though they are not human, Nurgle Daemon Princes practice sorcery. That allows this ritual to function. Disturbing Voice, Fear +1, Hardy, Size +1, Sound Constitution. You can select this up to 3 times. True Grit, And additionally, you cannot run because the whole thing is inevitability. You're gonna slow walk at them to death.
He's just standing there, menacingly.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can do if you have to fight this motherfucker by yourself. Like,
Also, I do like the.
it takes like a company of Space Marines to maybe put down one. You probably want an entire chapter. Let's be fair.
You want the Grey Knight.
The Grey Knights, ideally, or just a shitload of Imperial Guard.
I do like, though, the image here. Well, the guy firing the bolt gun whose head is either on fire or covered in a gas.
It's probably both. Let's be fair. Actually, that guy kind of reminds me of the Black Flame from Hellboy. If you're wondering, the Black Flame is there were 3 iterations of him. The original version, lore-wise, was a World War I era German fighter pilot who had mild supernatural abilities because he visited a temple in Southeast Asia and gained almost like a spectral or skeletal ability. The second one is the Herald to the End of the World, according to legend. And the third is him reborn. So let's see. Let's go on from here. From there, launching a Black Crusade. The Black Crusade core rulebook introduces the possibility of running massive war efforts. So you can choose your own apocalypse.
I think Tome Decay was the last one. So it's fitting that you have, well, what do you do after you beat the game?
Yeah.
You start your own war. Which, honestly, at this point, I would just play out the games. Like, if you're ever planning an action, you just break out the miniatures and you fight the battles.
The problem is that completely changes flow, and not everyone willingly likes minis.
I know. I'm just saying, if you have it, just because at this point, like, you bring your own characters into the game. You know that they have specific stats. I feel like that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So the War Master's Ascension. Some ideas is you could do a Tide of Blood, a Campaign of Subversion for Slaanesh, Advancing the Inevitable, or the Triumph of Decay. And you can actually gather hosts. You can build your own Black Crusade. These are the Mighty Warrior hosts, because you're a Daemon Prince at this point, man. These are the things that you organize. And hey, they mentioned the cults. Legitimately, you can organize your own cults. You can create your own sorcerer cabals. You get to pick lieutenants, which can actually include characters from your original Black Crusade game before that character became a Daemon Prince.
And they straight up allow you to expand beyond the Screaming Vortex.
Oh god, yeah.
So you can just fuck up the Calixus sector.
Or the Cronus Expanse.
Or the Jericho
Reach. The stars are your limit. This is the campaign after you become a Daemon Prince, buddy. And actually, a fun idea could be you run a series of Black Crusade games until you get the equivalent of your player group's numbers of those gifted with Daemon Princehood. And organize a fuck you crusade to burn Calixus or to burn Jericho. And there's also additional targets, so you could just burn through even more.
Fuck it, we're invading Terra.
And you could draw the crusade. Holy shit, they literally give you rules for running the crusade. Before the first crusade turn begins, the War Master, like, they actually stat this out.
Yeah, this is like,
oh my god,
they use star charts from other role-playing or the other role-playing games. Again, break out the minis, break out physical stuff. The rules for running a Black Crusade are by no means a substitute for actual role-playing. Instead, they are intended as a supplement to the PC's actions.
Holy shit. Now the goals you have to set have to be pretty impressive because you're a fucking Demon Prince at this point.
I mean, think about... I'm actually going to go and see the results of the other Black Crusades to give suitable examples of what you're looking for.
Also, Crusade length. Any effort on the scale of Black Crusade is as vulnerable as it is mighty. It is entirely possible it will collapse.
So the first Black Crusade, you founded Damon's. Abaddon found Drachnin. You know, the 12th one, he captures Blackstone fortresses, causing all sorts of other chaos. And finally, with the 13th, blowing up Cadia.
Yep. Which did change the meta, but it kind of made it really dumb that they tried really hard to make Abaddon look like a genius when they had 12 equivalent stasises. If they were differently targeted besides Cadia, it'd be maybe more understandable.
They were. 12th was the Gothic War. That was outside of
Fair enough.
Cadia.
Fair enough. Sorry, I'm just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of retcon that instead of being.
They kind of retcon Abaddon to always be smart when in reality, you know, you can just straight fucking lose a crusade. It's okay to have him lose a few. You know.
I mean, he kind of is at this point because he's got Chaos running around like half the Imperium, but they're all going after each other. There's no real unity. Because that's the whole thing. Black Crusade is to gather all of the forces of chaos instead of them fighting each other and squabbling for power. A powerful being points at whatever target and just launches the forces at them. Most of them are going to die, and that's their point. But the end result is they obtain glory and you obtain what you desire.
So Crusade turns, you assign leadership, naval conflicts. Do they actually, War Master side key events in the description, any territory, post-conflict, resolve conflicts after the War Master's force has been deployed, resolve conflicts phase. In this phase, bloody war is raged across, you select contested territories, into which the War Master has played one or more hosts, leaderless conflicts, key events. I'm actually curious on if they recommend playing the minis.
I don't see anything about that, just because this is more broader scale, but I'd say your final battle, you have to break out the miniatures. The game is not decided then by these dice rolls. You get a bunch of your buddies, and you're setting up the guard, you're setting up your chaos, you build the characters, and you go to town, and whoever wins, wins.
It does require you to have at least enough people interested in the minis, which you should at least have one other person willing, because usually these battles are more two-man games.
I'm saying go Apocalypse at that point. Crack out the Titans.
You could, but at that point, you're expecting people like what? Do you have people putting like a second mortgage on their fucking house to have a bunch of those? There's a reason Apocalypse doesn't have many players.
Some people have them. I don't know how or why, but some people do. The interesting thing they have is the fact that lieutenants can go traitor. They can become discontent if they get too much power and decide to operate independently, and you've got to now wrap them in line or wipe them out.
Yep, treachery and discontent, because your lieutenants, yeah, they might just decide, fuck you. So they give you map events, and they also, yeah.
A lot of them are God aligned, like you're given a chance to do something that's kind of associated with your patron. An Orc Wa just emerges.
Unironically, Jim makes a point that I kind of agree with, but also kind of disagree with. In terms of the most well-known leaders in 40k, it does feel like there's only a couple of people on the top. But if you think about it, fantasy kind of has the same point of view. It's really just, it's a case of, do you know the certain people? Because in fantasy, yeah, there's all sorts of Norscan warband berserker guys that lead their own little armies of chaos, but they still haven't ever chosen.
Yeah, the ever chosen. I mean, you've got your aligned leaders.
Well, with Abaddon, he's merely just the organizers of some of the greatest of the Black Crusades. There's entire bevy of characters who run their own groups.
Hanso,
for example, is a well-known example. He ran one of the larger Iron Warrior groups.
Yep.
Fabius Bile unironically runs his own entire schemes by himself.
You have the various ward bearer hosts. You have Decimus of the Night Lords. And you've got Alfarius.
Although is it Alfarius or just a bunch of people who have LARPed as him because the real one got his head fucking ripped off at some point during the early stages of the heresy? Who knows?
They're all Alfarius.
They all have the brain problem. So the Pestilent Worlds, this is something I wanted to look at, just because it just builds the kind of disgusting things you will find in the Screaming Vortex. Each of the tomes have some of the worlds like this. One example includes Pyrrhotide. Pyrrhotide hangs in the void like a wound. A pestilent boil amidst the stars, this blight in space even among the varied and terrible wonders of the vortex. Clutched forever to Nurgle's rotting breast, Pyrrhotide stands as a shining example of his love, a festering reminder to all who survey it as the inevitability of decay, the state to which all things pass. The planet itself is wreathed in miasmal clouds of toxic vapor. Centuries of biological and chemical warfare by its decayed inhabitants have rendered the atmosphere near lethal. While still barely breathable, prolonged exposure will spell death as surely as any conventional weapon. Certain areas of the surface are completely lethal. Various gases and compounds, having settled into pockets of lingering death, consume the unaware in mere moments. Beneath these poisonous clouds, the scars of Pyrrhotide's legacy of destruction covers its surface. It's a soup of mud and flesh, pulverized into a near liquid state by bombardment. Rusting hulks of shattered tanks, APCs, and other war machines dot the morass like islands jutting out of a sea of rot. Abandoned earthworks and trench lines riddle its surface.
So this is the alternate Deathcore Krieg.
Like I said, I think that could be a fun idea for a Lost and Damned regiment, which is essentially mockeries of the Kriegers.
You have these abandoned shining cities that are now broken.
Oh, also, Scroll Killer, no, there's actually several ever chosen. We just really only know 3 of them. They only really seriously described 3 of them. There were more besides them.
Well, you had Asvokal, Archeon, Be'lakor. Was he never chosen?
No, he was not.
He's not. And who's the other? Sharon?
I don't know. I just know that there's like one more. It's like one of the first ever chosen. Because there's several. Archeon was just the one prophesied to be the last one picked. So yeah, the Shining Cities. Larger, more intact beginnings begin to appear. They may have once been cities. These ruins stand in dark contrast to the rest of the structures. There's also the Living Sea. They possess no ocean. No vast expanse of water separates the continents, and no briny depths fills the voids between lands. Instead, a living mass washes against the coast, a sea of insects. Clouds of foul, chitinous bodies, ceaseless trillions in number, writhe between the land masses. It's a mass of life so huge as to be incomprehensible to normal minds. It squirms, flutters, and crawls and tides across the face of the world. The great swarms are completely inimical to life.
That gives me an idea of, the sounds of waves crashing against, the land. Imagine that, but replaced with insect buzzing.
No, and cricket noises and fluttering.
Ugh.
Yeah, oh boy, Black Crusade, Dax. We actually covered Tome of Decay is actually a very magical book because it gives you something to do if you actually say, hey, I want to still continue to play a Daemon Prince. What do? You run an actual Black Crusade. And what Impstead's suggesting, and I do think this is a genuinely fun idea, what you do is you pick a couple of the more interesting battles. Like I would say during the tactical phase, you pick 2 or 3 of the more interesting battles and run them as minis.
And if you have,
and the victories in there kind of determines the tempo and pace of the crusade.
And if you got the other miniatures, you got Kill Team. If you've got
if you only got a few, you can do Kill Team. If you got if you have decent selection, you do the standard battlefield. If you if you're both rich as fuck or demented enough to burn most of your money on plastic crack, go full apocalypse. Who gives a shit? Run it like some gigantic nightmare in your garage.
So you have living on this planet the Pox tribes. It's not devoid to human life. It has a sizable population. Centuries ago, there were two distinct factions, the Ancestors, which one day become the Pox tribes, and a race of beings referred to as the Shining Ones. We don't know what happened to the Shining Ones. They might have been similar to the Eldar, or they were humans from a different part of the galaxy, but, well, they're gone. It
Yep.
is known that they technologically advanced race. The Pox tribes, though, instead, they venerate Nurgle. They saw these shining cities as an affront. They united, and they then wiped them out.
Actually, here's my take on it. Maybe the Shining Ones were actually a cult of Tzeentch. Because remember, one of Tzeentch's more interesting features for his realm are crystalline spires. Remember?
Or, what if they were a dark age of technology?
That's also possible. That's also possible. Maybe Pyrrolitide used to be a pretty decently well-known planet during the Dark Age, but because of the Age of Strife, it fell into the Screaming Vortex. Like the Vortex might have been formed then, or always was there, and they fell.
And
Also,
apparently,
Pyrrolitide is most known because one of the first adventures they really made for Black Crusade, Rivals for Glory, features it. So it's kind of fitting that they open up with Pyrrolitide.
and yeah, they go over more on these soldiers and what these are. You have plague ogrins, even blight drones.
Also, here's an example of of a native of Pyrrolitide right here. They have constantly been at war with each other for so long, they're basically Kriegers.
Kriegers, but they've got a bug theme to them.
Which I think is pretty cool. I actually really like Pyrrolitide.
And they're led at least one of them by the Entomancer.
If you're wondering why it's called an Entomancer, well, there's a beautiful image of him right here. It's because entomology, the study of insects.
He's got like a cockroach with him.
Oh, well, also he himself is a cockroach.
Oh, actually, realize this. He's got, I think those are either it's either biological or mechanical insect wings.
Those are mechadendrites. The wings, I think, are biological.
Ooh. But then the next planet, Gulf.
Yep, Guelph. So, known across the anticidual entries into the vortex, the past haunting grounds of the Cassacratch, lies the orb of poison known as Guelph. Wreathed in clouds of corrosive toxic gas, it's known for two things: its massive network of forges and laboratories, and the callous nature of its people. Life on the planet's surface is one of survival for the natives and non-natives alike. There's very few resources, and general population would just as soon kill another person than have to deal with them. It wasn't always this way.
So they had.
They're referencing Italian city-state feuding. Because Guelphs and Ghibellines were both two cliques that were a very big problem in Italian city-state politics that led to routine vendetta wars between each other.
So basically, when there were these two planets ruled by the Menloca clan, then Slanish's birth tore it apart.
Mm-hmm.
And Guelph lost its share of solar energy as it flew more into the storm, and the system grew into an amalgam of roughly 17 different planetary bodies. Stability was more fragile, and
also, since they mentioned Ghibelline, my assumption is that is in the Tome of Excess, that planet.
maybe. They ended up reconnecting, but ended up, I guess, massive divisions. And so now the survivors, I guess, on Gelf, they are working with a Brotherhood of Warpsmiths.
Yep. So it is essentially a planet run by the Iron Warriors, and that's why their terms
By,
of life is so low.
led by Jal Khalid. Uh, it's they're Nurgle infected. Both this Lord Maloka and these Warpsmiths are infected by a similar disease.
Yep.
And actually, on the right there is a nice
That's an obliterator.
Yeah, the old-fashioned metal obliterator.
Obliterator virus is a very fun one.
So they're now working together, and Jal Khalid also is eager to have a testing ground for their creations. Once the people of the planet were cured, they finally meet face to face. Forges sprout up like weeds, and the highly motivated people in the advanced technological sorcery of the Brotherhood, plans for the conquest of Gibelline took form and moved to rapid pace.
Gibelline is a Slaaneshi world. Yep. Strange new weapons that overloaded the senses, destroyed physical matter with sound, and turned them into puppets of the Gibellines.
So, at the end of the 5 years, the Brotherhood had an arsenal of devastating daemon engines, elite guard obliterators, and willing to lend the Pit Lord. The time to reignite the fires of war had come.
I kind of like that they actually play around with a planet that was probably introduced in the Tome of Excess. I like that. Also, I like that this is like, while the atmosphere is still essentially the same poisonous, noxious death gas, the worlds are different already. Gelf is much more akin to, honestly, the best way to describe it is the dark half of a Forge world. If you really think about it. Toxic salt flats that glow and occasionally catch fire. Oh god, sodium fires. I love it. Pure sodium fires.
They eventually fought.
I'm not going fully over the history because that's like a lot. I'm just kind of skimming. Essentially, they fought their sisters, the Gibellines, and do they actually?
Well, actually, husband and wife.
Yep.
The Pit Lord is of Gelf, and his wife is of Gibelline.
Mm-hmm. And Gelf is known for its daemon engines. They also have a variety of Forge Fiends and Mauler Fiends, which are...
Mauler introduced 6th edition as different from the Crab Defiler. The Mauler Fiend is a melee variant. Forge Fiend is a shooty demon.
They also have Plague Towers, which they show them right here, and they look suitably good.
I believe they were used in Epic.
They were.
And then the Writhing World.
Which we saw one of their sorcerers, remember? Yeah. Approaching the celestial body, referred to in most charts and texts simply as the Writhing World, one experiences a transformative awakening that continues right down into the planet's surface. From a great distance, the Writhing World appears little different from any of the other planets locked within the clutches of the vortex. In fact, from extreme visual ranges, the planet possesses a strange, factitious beauty almost. The swirling tans and browns of the planet's surface are reminiscent of a shimmering sand globe, while floating gracefully above the planet are undulant clouds of black eddying in the upper atmosphere, almost like a ring. An iridescent ring actually surrounds the whole, which plays host to 4 verdant moons that hang like emeralds on the chain. The thing is, though, as you get closer, reality opens up like a corpse flower. The first thing you notice is the writhing world is the composition of vast sweeping ring that surrounds the planet. Looking closer, the ring is actually not comprised of dust and stone. Each chunk of matter fixed within that band is a knot of fey wriggling meat. Tendrils and flesh undulate to undetectable currents. From the largest asteroids to the tiniest motes, each thrashes softly with the bizarre mimicry of life. The 4 moons that orbit around the world are interesting because of their sheer normality. The flora and fauna are primitive in their development and sophistication, but they present a nice blender set against the world that they orbit.
And then when they get to the atmosphere of the planet, they'll find navigation and flight difficult, as the air is almost nearly solid with the stench of rot.
Mm-hmm.
Any attempt to breathe without filtration experiences the decomposition of an entire planet beneath one's feet. The surface of the world is formed by an array of fleshy tubules that present in a wide range of sizes. The great tendrils are massive, continent-sized masses of rippling flesh. On a more standard planet, these fleshy models would play the role of bedrock, mountains, and rolling plains. So that means living tectonics.
The flesh that composes them move in slow, deliberate rolls spanning the corporeal rainbow from fleshed health to gangrenous decay as the entire planet experiences the ballet of life, death, decay, and rebirth. And then there are lesser tendrils, yep.
Ranging from trunks, the girth of a corpulent man, to hair-fine shoots that seem to shift in a breeze no man can feel. Lesser tendrils show more life than their greater brethren, standing in for grass, trees, and undergrowth. This does have water. Glistening lakes, rivers, and seas gleam from orbit. However, they're filled with bile, phlegm, and pus, and other biological solutions.
Yep.
A veritable of microbiotica. Sorry, the prose in this is just
it's
perfect.
Great. That's why I want to read it. We both want to read it. This is genuinely well written.
There is something about Nurgle, in its description and in the miniatures, that is disgustingly beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Instability is the only constant. Nothing is certain. The great tendrils are constantly moving, causing disturbing quakes that can destroy the works of man in the blink of an eye. When those tendrils deep beneath a lake or sea shift enough, the contents might drain out, only to re-emerge elsewhere. Countless aquatic vermin are stranded in a moment upon vast plains of drying flesh, while landborne life drowns half a world away. What lurks beneath the surface? There's many theories as to what lies at the heart of the planet. Countless expeditions have been launched throughout the millennia, with an impressive roll of the most notable heretics of the Screaming Vortex gauging their way through the countless layers. No one's ever returned to the surface with indisputable proof of what lies at the center of the squirming, rotting meat. The majority of them speculate on the naturing of the planet, maintains the world consists of nothing but layer upon layer of flesh, a gnarled tangle of squirming tendrils, pseudopods, and ganglia. If that's the case, it's probable these tendrils closest to the core are dying or dead, pushed under by more vibrant brothers. This would explain the scent of decay that pervades it. Darker tales whisper of an entire civilization lying crushed beneath the flesh, patiently awaiting an intrepid champion who would tear a hole through the planet to discover its secrets. But the thing is, we'll never fully know. By the way, there's that giant mite from the Riving World. Remember that Death Fortress thing? There it is.
Yeah.
There he is.
So some of the darkest legends say that it might be a greater demon or a demon prince, that the planet is forever altered at the moment of an apotheosis. It's simply a living creature.
That could be that could be the thing. This entire world could just be a gigantic greater daemon that came out of a man, or maybe it's just a gigantic spawn.
I mean, there is that planet in the Eye of Terror that is literally a giant fat man.
Yeah. But the best part is you don't know, and that's the beautiful thing. And a lot of the life forms are similar to things that you would find on people, like mites or ticks or fleas.
So there are people that live on this planet.
They do.
They are living. They utilize,
and they're not even dead. There's not even, because there's also zombie hordes that live on the planet too.
They're nomadic tribesmen using the exoskeletons of vermin for anything they would need. And the flesh of the planet, though, is a constant source of nourishment. I mean, the land is living. You can eat it.
Also, most of them are actually not from the world. They just choose to settle here.
So something is calling to them.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also have the crawling citadels,
which are the giant mite things. Also, the moons themselves are carved out by many of the more powerful biomancers.
Most powerful of the current Biomancer lords is Adipose Rex,
Yep.
Lord of Loannis. He is a mammoth gargantuan man whose portly, smiling face hides the coldly calculating mind of the master of the planet. He rules over the most fecund, temperate zones of the northern hemisphere. The moon Loannis is a glossy jade ball whose steamy jungles and foliage swamps are swarmed with violent thrashing life. The palace of Surfeit, surrounded by swollen, overripe trees and central riding fruit, ugly squat structure built from brown green native stone.
Mm-hmm. Because the Rithing world itself doesn't actually have many who live there. It's mostly people who are called to it. It's the moons that have them. And there's a bunch of them. And here's what a Huskman looks like. They essentially are stitched together quasi-living, mostly dead corpses that are given chitin as their tools. Then there's the world of Hindrance, which is it's an unprepossessing sallow orb of yellow-brown sands, swathed in murky storms and blasted by a constant scream of warp energies which swirl and skirl around it. Squats within a few weeks scant travel from the 13th station of passage. One of the gloaming worlds at the outer edge of the vortex, Hindrance's growing reputation as a place sacred to the Lord of Decay has let it become a pilgrimage site for Nurgle's followers. It lies directly in the path of the warp current known as the Black Gyre, which tips crafts emerging from the corpse-shrouded maw of the 13th station of passage directly into this energy
Into the
storm
vortex.
of
So it's right on the edge of the actual, on the eye of the storm, I'd say.
Or yeah, possibly. Either that or it's right on the edges of the vortex itself.
There is a map in the main book that probably would explain more of it, but the planet itself
Oh
is
no,
an ugly.
this is an interesting one because they actually mention a star type you only hear about. It's not actually a star. It's a brown dwarf. It's a substar.
Oh,
This is technically, so for those wondering, a brown dwarf, if you've never heard of them, is essentially a failed star. So during stellar creation, you need a certain amount of dust mass in order to condense and form fusion. The smallest actual star is known as a red dwarf. They are just large enough to barely fuse hydrogen to helium. They are very known for flaring up. They are the dimmest, but also going to be the longest living stars. Brown dwarfs are those bodies that are not large enough to actually initiate fusion. Now, can that you have things, like planets or moons, because they're almost more planet-like than star-like. Can they still harbor life? Hypothetically, mainly because a sufficiently large brown dwarf does actually release light, because it does get hot enough for intermittent fusion and friction. It's not quite a star, but it can still emit a lot of radiation. Fun fact, Jupiter and most gas giants are technically brown dwarfs. They're just very light. Brown dwarfs can weigh as much as I believe 10 Jupiters to up to 80 Jupiters. So it's really interesting. This is essentially an almost lightless world. It's called a dim brown dwarf star, so it wouldn't be a star, it's a brown dwarf. So basically, this thing is almost completely pitch black, barring the flare-ups of dull red that emit from the giant mound of gas that it orbits. And it's just within the habitable zone.
so the planet itself, it's an ugly and bleak world. Its sandy surface, the color of decaying, greasy flesh, pockmarked with impact craters from some prehistoric cataclysm. It's surrounded, blanketed in endless deserts and black, dead, silty, oily seas.
Mm-hmm.
It has moons, but they pass unpredictably around the system's feeble star.
No, they're consistent around the star, but in the Black Gyre, so every now and again they just get douched with warp energy. It feels like it's almost out of the vortex itself. Like it's a world that is slowly orbiting into it, you know?
Circling the drain.
Yeah.
And it doing so create the warp energy. It ends up creating these massive storms to the point where they can be the size of continents.
Oh, yeah.
And
Actually, the funniest thing is this is basically Mars, but hell.
They're so deadly that nothing can be permanently built on the surface.
Also, since Jim has posted a map, let me take a look to get an idea on where exactly we are.
Bit hard to read.
It's a little too small. Let me take a closer look.
The third message. It's right on like the right side.
Ah, yeah, I see it.
It is actually on the edge.
Yeah, it is. It is legitimately just barely in real space. No wonder it's a pilgrimage site for Nurglites. This is basically one of the gateways to actually get into the vortex.
So despite the fact there's no settlement they've built on the surface,
you can't really live on the surface because of the gigantic magnetic storms.
But there are some.
Oh, I love this heretic assembling a servitor here. That's cool.
Yeah, looking at its guts. But there are some permanent settlements. The world's imminently prolonged human habitation.
Yeah, because the thing is, the seas are actually water. It's just so polluted and infested with warp energy, it will just fucking kill you if you try to drink it.
So I'm assuming actually some of them are underneath the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is Pulsula.
Pusula. It is a, let's see, it's a tiny shanty town of 300.
Mm-hmm. Created by a Nurg Kultai of the Screaming Vortex, a movement which, despite only emerging in the last handful of decades, seems to enjoy a vivid canon of wicked myths and fables.
Oh, also the the polar caps of this planet, Hindris, are formed of yellowing and poisonous ice, which actually, while we're dealing with chaos magic, let's be fair, the warp do funny things. But in biological terms, that would actually mean that these are seas of heavily ammonia. It means that there's also ammonia in that ice.
So they are right when saying don't eat the yellow snow.
Well, yeah. Or it could be uric acid. Like maybe, I mean, that's the other thing. It could just be the Black Gyre pisses on the planet.
Oh God, it's a magical realm.
It's the piss pole.
The piss planet. So, the town of Pulsula, composed of temporary dwellings constructed with whatever material they have on hand.
Which is mostly just scrap. It is scrap and garbage.
It's built on a single dust-tracked street over a pair of ancient rusty shipping containers of imperial manufacture, which is buried beneath the sands. They're used as septic tanks and shelters.
Yep.
Most would find the idea of being confined neck-deep in odor for days on end with hundreds of others in a tiny underground space utterly appalling. But to the nerd culti of Pulsula, this is regarded as an amusing diversion, a potential anecdote to regale fellow travelers with on some future occasion. Indeed, some speak highly of the experience, referring jokingly to taking the waters on hindrance, as they visited some famed spa in an exotic imperial paradise world.
That's pretty great. I actually like that.
Honestly, yeah, they should.
The town's routinely destroyed by the frequent warp storms. This happens 2 or 3 times a year, but honestly, the inhabitants are chill with it. They'll ride the storm in their piss bunker, unironic piss bunker, and then they'll just reemerge to rebuild it from the crap that remains.
They're Floridians.
I kind of.
They're well. Hurricanes pass. Time to build again. Come on, kids. Come on, kids. We get to go where our shit lies. a rich oral tradition is emerging. Whichever is the largest shack, cavern, or tent at one time acts as a general meeting place for the assembled cultists. They regale each other with stories about the Plague Father and his relationship with the world Hindrance, which is starting to be regarded as a world holy to him.
Well, I mean,
Some of the
it is a pretty harsh and kind of beautiful little world in its own way. If you like desert worlds, this is basically Mars but filled with piss. It's piss Mars. There are legends of Hindrance. Tad pilgrims of the Plague God are drawn to Hindrance by the belief there's an intensely symbolic and magically significant link between the planet and Nurgle himself. They see everything in the world, which actually, if you think about it, doesn't it make sense? Because the oceans are heavily polluted and toxic and constantly wear down the coastlines. The mountain ranges on the planet are made out of a very soft and brittle form of sandstone that just kind of crumble under the storms.
mm-hmm.
You can kind of see why they believe this planet's somewhat holy to Nurgle.
Those who survive the bleak pyramid speak in reedy, phlegmy voices of journeys lasting weeks through the blasted desert. Describe an experience which tested their endurance to the very limit of limping scab-shod through endless fields of flinty, blade-edged rock, running low on supplies being forced to turn to cannibalism, of consuming the reeking and diseased corpses of their fellow pilgrims.
Well, yeah, if you're wondering, they mentioned that the atmosphere of Hindrance, it is breathable, but it's also filled with micro shards of silicon rock. So it's constantly shredding your lungs with black lung.
And there are things living in the so-called Bone Desert. Some say that they may have been from a great war that took place on the planet. Others say they're useless slaves dumped from the dark magi of Alatica. Or Lactia. Those possibly it was another great civilization. But they're called the
not an amazing. It probably wasn't like a civilization, or if it was, maybe the equivalent of a Pharaoh world.
And then there's also the faithless,
which are ghouls, essentially.
Those who died in the service of Nurgle, but without the true love of their master rotting within their souls.
Yep, these are essentially ghouls.
And there is the Broken Tribe, or the Broken Temple.
Mm-hmm. There's rumored to be a desolate landscape where no geological feature more than a few inches high. Eventually, like, basically, it's almost like, in Warhammer fantasy terms, it's almost like you've entered the realm of chaos.
So eventually they find some form of low building. As they approach, they realize they were at a great distance from it, and it was built on an impossibly titanic scale. There are many different.
I love this planet. It's really cool.
There are many different descriptions of the building. Some describe fallen pillars hundreds of feet in circumference. Others mention crumbling spires or domes, a fallen ziggurat, slumped under its own weight. But they all describe it eventually as a temple.
One that rivals some of the largest of imperial shrines, actually.
Hewn from some, oh no.
Black stone.
Oh no.
It's always spoken of as broken and shattered, and all have seen it agreed it continues to crumble and disintegrate before their eyes, with some features beginning to destroy themselves as they approach. Constant rain of slates and bricks that fall from an obscure corner.
Oh no, this... It says it is a Blackstone. Given the latest updates to Warhammer lore, those were... that may have been originally Necron.
Almost certainly.
The Necrons used the Blackstone to repel psychic energy. However, it can be inverted to be a instead of repelling, amplifying the warp.
It would make sense that that would probably explain why Hindrance technically isn't in the vortex then. That crumbling edifice is probably the only thing keeping it together.
But
which means that's a target for. That's why Nurgle's telling them to come here.
It could be though that it's a that it has somehow now inverted. I mean, again, this is from later lore, but
I don't think it's inverted yet. Because
Well,
they didn't
because
know this. I think they just described it based on what you found around Katie, like the Blackstone fortresses and shit.
probably,
They
but
got it from that. But this means lore-wise, this explains why Nurgle's sending them there. He wants them to find and actually get into that temple to invert it. Maybe expand the vortex. Because if it's
that
done right, it'll suck up more of the Calixis sector, I think, because I think that's where it is in location. I didn't get a good look.
um,
Or no, actually, no, it's Jericho. I think it's
but
close
then
to the Jericho
apparently,
side.
Fear, Chaos Furies do surround it,
Which might mean
and
it is partially inverted. That might be what. Yeah, you might be right.
then there's the Bloated Pilgrim. Those who finally survive the trial of the temple are to encounter their final tests. That they encounter a single bloated pilgrim in a caravan apparently constructed from bones, pulled by a staggering pony whose tattered and rotting hide hung loosely from its skeletal frame. He invites them to rest for a while within his caravan, giving them stinking food and brackish water to drink, nursing them through some of the worst of their fevers, into yet higher and more disturbing ones.
Yep.
And finally, they gleefully divulge that their portly savior is none other than Nurgle himself, testing the bleak pilgrim's faith and finding them equal to a task of traveling onwards to infect the world.
I kind of like that Nurgle, or at least a shard of him, does appear almost like in an Odin-esque figure. In old Germanic myths, Odin was well known to travel like this. In fact, actually, Gandalf was based on one of the many depictions of Odin, with the blue hat and the walking stave. Gandalf from Lord of the Rings is very much based on Odin.
So actually, I could say it's partially inverted and partially not, in just a stable enough cycle of repulsion and compulsion that it's a cycle. In that case, it serves as a permanent test of decay.
Mm-hmm. I kind of like this place a lot. And they also have the moons Megaria and Alactia. Megaria is this somber. It's a black orb, utterly dark. Light seems to fall into the moon itself. Traveling to the moon is essentially suicidal. Any ship that does so discovers Megaria possesses a gravity well that is out of proportion to its size. While it is less than 1,000 kilometers, it registers as possessing a gravitational field equivalent to dozens of solar. It is a micro black hole. Holy shit! It is an actual fucking black hole. It possesses many of the properties of a neutron star, though its size and stable if eccentric orbit around hindrance suggests it's something else. It's a fucking black hole that orbits a planet. Oh my god, I love it.
Don't you just love how chaos tells physics to go fuck itself?
I love it. It's an actual orbiting black hole. Which actually, you know what would make this more hilarious? Unironically, this moon, if it accidentally sucks up something large enough, you would actually briefly see it a swirl of light around it, and it would briefly shit out X-rays in the form of two powerful bursts of shit. And as for the last of the hindrance system, there's Alactia. It's known as the junkyard moon because it has a pitted and rusting iron surface. It looks like an overripe fruit. Surrounded by buzzing insects, they are in fact the mercantile fleets of the tech priests of Alactia. Because
The mag-
Alactia is run by the Dark Mechanicum.
It's Morbos time.
The surface is basically a gigantic starport for the Dark Mechanicum. Yep, it's Morbos time. The Magi Morbos from sources across the Screaming Vortex come here.
And they are a Nurgle-esque sect of heretics.
Unironically, this is reminding me of something for a la Star Wars. How would you feel if, like, I mean, the whole the whole sequel trilogy sucks, but imagine if Jakku is much more of a junkyard planet than just another desert fucking planet.
We already have that. Raxus Prime.
Yeah. Wouldn't that have been great?
The thing is, that's not habitable. It is But yes, I'd love to see more adventures on it. I mean, I think I've only seen it in video games. It was only in the Clone Wars one and the Force Unleashed.
Yep. I mean, you could have imagine if the sequel trilogy had Jakku look a bit more like Raxus Prime. Maybe not completely, like you still have the desert waste, but like imagine mountain systems of just being junk.
Mountains of dead Star Destroyers and hills of the Mon Calamari ships.
Not just shipyard battles, man. Like it's the junkyard of a 10,000 years.
Ooh, well,
Which
that could be.
which can lead to some hilarious stuff. Like unironically, you could do an entire adventure on this alternate Jakku. Like if you're talking RPG systems, where like the oldest stuff you can find is stuff from the Infinite Empire.
I'm imagining, yeah, like this would have been a crazy Easter egg if they actually did that. You just have the Star Forge in the background, just poking out of the sand. Fans would have been like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. Like I said, one of the biggest issues. There's a million issues with Star Wars. This is not the right time to talk about it, but since it's like a space setting, I think it's fine. Um, there's a million problems with Disney Star Wars. The worst of them is just the cowardice at not coming up with more creative planets.
Because what we had 2 desert worlds.
No, more than 2. They keep making desert worlds because they're pussies.
Well, no, we had Jakku, and then we had the one with they fly now. We had the Salt Planet.
Which is bootleg Hoth, but more of a desert if you think about it.
We had Casino Planet.
Which was based more on the prequel, on the...
We had Sith version of...
No, let me finish. The Casino Planet is very much akin to the cargo cult understanding of the prequels. Like like the idea of John From being a divine entity because he looks like a U.S. airman. That, but in the form of like the Gungan planet mixed with Naboo.
So we had then Discount Coruscant that gets blown up. We had Ilum, which turned into the Starkiller base.
Yeah, Ilum was kind of cool until they did that. Then it got lame.
Then we have Ice Korriban.
Yay! Stop making Hoth bootlegs.
They apparently had Mustafar.
Of course they did.
You
have that shitty planet Lolth.
Well, that was, and then we from the movies at least, and then we have the two Jungle West planets. That's about it.
Which were based on like Endor and shit.
Oh, and then Nepal mining planet.
You know, unironically, if I had to design a Star Wars planet, here's my idea for one. It is based upon the Pacific Northwest. It is the large plant life are actually mycelial in nature, fungal. You have, instead of large trees, either gigantic mushrooms or large pillar-like objects that release oxygen as it seems to siphon from dead things on the ground.
No more fungal Felucia?
Yeah. But it's like, it's reasonably cool. It has mild winter. It has relatively quick but harsh, cold, wet winters, but it's reasonably cool weathering. It tends towards a cloudiness, though. The main plant life are more fungal in nature. There are plants, but they're the equivalent of ferns, lichens, and mosses.
You know, this is make me want. I want a mushroom Jedi.
And as for the animals native to this, they are actually plant-like. They are actually more plant-like, or maybe they should be based more on slime molds.
Cacti.
Nah, well, you could, but I think it misses the. It's a little too wrong for that.
What? Just imagine cacti people.
Cacti people are great. The other alternative is they're just worms, like annelids or something.
I have a feeling that these actually already exist in Star Wars somewhere.
They almost certainly do, because West End Games has a shitload of planets.
But back to then Electia.
Yeah, Lactia is a junkyard world. The Magi Morbos kind of run the show here, mostly Nurgleites. They accept payment in the work and form of slaves or plunder, and they are also free to infect one of the Magi with new and interesting diseases. So unironically, I like, for example, early Adam from the very beginning of Scum when he was recovering from the flu and the fucking strep, he could have showed up and they would have been like, cough on me, and I would have been like, all right, bet.
Then you have the planet of Mire.
That's where the death cultists come from.
Yep. And
It's a very cloudy world, as you do. There are no mountains, seas, or fields of growth, only the occasional plain of flat stone or dismal bogs that dot the land. It's basically a world that should be completely dead. Like, mechanically, there should be no one alive on this planet. But
thing is,
because of how Nurgle do, it don't matter.
It was once a lush planet.
Then the Rakatan Empire came in and punished the evil Sand People who decided to rebel against them in a Spartacus-like fashion.
Well, that was a water planet before. This is a jungle planet. So it's what Ithor once was before the Yuuzhan destroyed it.
Yay!
Yay, genocidal biological weapons
That are based on the Aztec Empire, but in the style of the Cenobites and Slaaneshi having hate sex.
And they ride coral starfighters.
Again, they feel like a 40k species more than Star
I
Wars.
know.
They feel like a 40k species.
I know, but that's what makes them so interesting.
Unironically, you could put the Yuuzhan Vong among the, I don't know, the Tau or something as like one of their allies, and it'd be fucking okay.
Actually, I'm wondering, they could
Do
fit
it. Do it. Put them in a Rogue Trader setting. Like, unironically,
they could fit the greater good. I mean,
also they hate abominable intelligences.
well, actually, no, yeah, that'd be a problem. They could not exist with the greater good because they will just kill the Tau. Because they straight up worship machines. But you know what's better? Yuuzhan Vong versus Necrons.
Yeah. There you go. But you could legitimately just say, fuck it, make the Vong a new faction in 40k. Why not?
But this planet, basically,
it's kind of boring. It's basically just a dead world that only exists because that only has people on it because Nurgle's like, here, have despair, motherfucker.
Well, no, here's the thing. It was virus bombed.
Ah.
Inquisitor Varstek, deemed unworthy of reintegration, called down for the orders of Exterminatus Extremis. So not only is this a toxic, biological swamp, now it's devoid of most of it because it's now infected with the Life Eater virus.
Well, on top of that, the another problem for the Myrans are that like, legitimately, they were cannibals, like full-on flesh-eating monsters, and they were all basically Nurgleites by the time that they got virus bombed.
Also, just Squirrel Killer, Star Wars is coolest when it stops pretending to be sci-fi and admits its fantasy with spaceships. Absolutely. It's World War II in space with wizards.
I would describe Star Wars more along the lines of, it's the equivalent of if you decided to take if you took 2 parts fantasy, one part adventure novel akin to Tarzan, Conan, or John Carter, and then you threw in Buck Rogers and just a dash of sci-fi. Because unironically, Star Wars was created because they couldn't get the rights to Buck Rogers.
No, was it Flash Gordon?
Flash Gordon, yes.
But
thanks for the correction. I fucked that up.
Continuing with Meyer, so about 1 to 2 million survived the long reign, and about half perished in the death throes of the Nihilo Ordere.
Yep.
But
But
now
it doesn't matter. Nurgle basically is like, holy shit, you guys survived? Okay, alright, bet.
And the strongest Myrans were naturally gifted with chaos, received the bounty of the recent dead, creating a potent new ruling class, often steeped in the powers of the warp.
I tend to not find Mire that interesting personally, so I'm trying to skip it, especially since it's past 11.
Well, I was saying, their leaders are infected with a Pyron.
Oh, okay. They are infected from prion disease.
And they decided to create a massive genetic breeding program. Every 1,000th Myron born possesses a superior immune system, resistance to disease, and these hapless creatures named Pyrons are ritually sacrificed by Myers' death priests. Their insides torn asunder and exposed to sacred samples of Nurgle's rot before they are devoured. And the demons that arise from these rituals of discarded humanity fully materialize in all their putrid glory. It's gone on for centuries. Now the plague lord.
I'm just curious. Strong Smearns and those naturally are privy to the revered valiant recent dead. Prior Knights, these brain gorge signs of disease. Provide the means for.
So Nurgle just into a massive incubator for his demonic legions. In fact, straight up, demons just exist on this planet.
Yeah.
They don't wither away.
I'm gonna be honest. Like I said, Meyer is kind of boring to me.
Still, the image of this fat guy, pretty interesting.
It's interesting. It's just it's a little too try hard, and it's mostly just welcome to Poop World. Population boring.
So they give us stats for a bunch of other things. So the next big planet, page 117, Frozen Heart.
They also stat out a lot of the stuff that we talked about. They also include the Thanator. There's a lot. It's weird. They talk so much about Meyer, but I find it one of the less interesting worlds they made.
It's kind of more of like a civilized planet. And this is chaos. We need it to be crazy.
No, Meyer doesn't feel that civilized to me, though.
Well, it has a civilization on it. Because the other ones we had Wizard Kings, a settlement that hides in its fecal matter, and then.
Well, no, because they talk about the Rust Moon, which I found kind of interesting, because it kind of has Rax's Prime energy. I think it's just because it's mostly dead rock, barring the few bogs that are still around, and it's just run by cannibal cultists. Okay.
So, well, the next one is then the Frozen Heart.
All right, so the lower vortex defies explanation. The power of chaos engulfs the entire region, leaving it adrift from mortal concepts like time and space. Within this realm, everything is possible, and the power of the chaos gods at its zenith. The worlds trapped within the lower vortex are raw and seething, utterly untamed, and impossible to inhabit by anything but more than the wretched of the lost and damned. At the center of this swirling nightmare lies the Frozen Heart, a world that exists as the literal eye of the storm.
Cursey have stepped on the demon world and lived to tell the tale. Lunatics claim that they exist in 4 distinct domains, each one in perfect balance, yet endless battle with those to either side. Oh crap! It's the actual warp.
It's a little world. It's a war world for the daemons. Yep.
So you have. Let's see. You have the realm of creation. This is the power of Tzeentch. Horrors cavort in the grounds as at their feet heaves and splits with Tzeentch's fleeting desires. Possible daemon plants sprout, growing flowing lakes of multicolored water as screamers glide among the grasping branches. It remains lethal to all opposed to the Great Conspirator, and his multi-hued armies rush to cast aside the forces of Nurgle. Then there is the Realm of Destruction. It is a shrouded in red mists, choked with the ashes of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
You have
the realm of obsession and the realm of desiccation.
With specific chaos spawn.
Yep.
Blood Beast, Pain Leech, Foul Spawn.
Hey, Foul Spawn.
Well, that's I guess it's both the name of a character and Nurgle. Prince.
Oh,
and then
God, fireworms. Those are interesting.
Oh, you can have Chaos Spawn as minions.
Yes, you can. Also, the Maddening Heights, separated from the daily maelstrom of renewal and death, the Northern Pole's barren landscape might appear as a refuge, but any hope of this false reprieve offer vanishes and the madness of the region takes hold. Survival in this environment is next to impossible, as dried, choking dust claim any who stumble, and rotting, half-buried corpses litter the landscape. If you somehow survive, you face something worse than death because you become spawn.
So, then if you go south, though, the southernmost reaches. It's a frozen landscape of jagged, irregular hills and sharp obsidian crevices. But they hide the most terrifying secrets. Mortals that drag themselves to the southern region usually perish within hours, but not from the flocks of furies. But instead, the mortals, most volatile mortals that came before, a host of dim shades that silently drift towards their victims, their eyes filled with fury and bloodlust.
Oh yeah, there's ghosts.
You're fighting armies of ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And then these grim guardians, possibly the first daemon engines, infuse the power of 4 warring greater demons. So if you get to the heart of it, you're gonna have to fight a powerful daemon engine.
That's actually possessed by shards of 4 different daemons all in one. And they're able to work together despite this insanity. And
And
there's the
finally,
Ascendant Spiral.
which is a merchant hub. Gangs of
Yep.
slave information brokers strive endlessly to capture those that travel through the spiral so that they may unlock its true power. So it's slavery of insane people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it up until then the campaign with a stunning picture of what going to the warp looks like.
I actually really like that. We could do a quick run through, I think, of Vortex. It'll make this a little over 3 hours, but why not?
So Heart of the Vortex takes place on Meyer.
Yeah. Oh. Well, even if I don't like it, let's at least. I don't like not the quest. I just don't like Meyer. I think it's the least interesting of the worlds they wrote.
I do like this quote though. Don't think of it as dying and rotting. It is glorious fermentation. That is our purpose, children of the Plague Father. Your end is countless beginnings and countless ends, circling each other eternally, watched by our blessed patron.
Mm-hmm.
Hovit, Lord of the Brackish Depths, before vanishing into the depths of mire.
Like I said, not a fan of Meyer personally, but let's just be. So the prior Knights of Meyer are cast of sorcerer kings that feed on the brains of their subjects and make themselves host to some of the worst of Nurgle's blessings, and they are based on prions, which is pretty clever. I will give credit. I do like the idea of that. It's just like I said. I think Meyer as a setting is boring, which is unfortunate because you have to start here. It's a two-parter. You first arrive on Meyer, and then from there you encounter a variety of servants of Nurgle and face the many threats of everyday existence on Meyer. Because yeah, Meyer sucks. It's mostly abandoned. The world itself is very toxic. It's breathable, but barely. And at any point, you can just be eaten for your flesh. Like, let's be fair.
They do present, though, also difficulties for characters that are dedicated to specific gods.
Oh yeah, you have fun if you're like a Zinchian. Also, they mentioned that if you also have the Tome of Excess, uh, it actually bridges from its adventure at the Edge.
Yeah, I think it went. I think it went Korn, Zinch, Slanesh, and Nurgle. But I think they all connect.
So Heart of Vortex is set on Mara, which is very unfortunate for me. I think that's kind of lame, but that's just me. Characters dedicated to Zinch, those who follow Zinch, are going to find themselves at odds here. Have fun. Your personal goal takes place at the climax. It represents dedicated to Zinch with the chance to prove the ultimate knowledge. They just kind of give you what their ultimate goals are, and you get additional rewards. So you go to Meyer, and many of the things you encounter on are the many hazards of Meyer because the air on it is thick, almost glutinous with the myriad contagions of the plague god. Invisibility is limited to just a few dozen meters. All about you is a lambid acid green haze. Tendrils of mist occasionally creep inwards to grasp about your ankles with an almost sentient intent. The ground is a stinking morass, each step you take causing your feet to sink into a substance neither natural nor artificial, but a delightful confluence of both. As you progress, the going gets ever harder. In places, The mud itself swells and rises as if to block your path or funnel you to a different one, and strange shape loom in the green mist. Things stir in the fetid mud, brushing against your ankles before sinking down once more, and questing tendrils of mist seek to force themselves into your nostrils as you breathe. At length, it becomes apparent that the terrain itself stirs against you, and if you intend to survive or press any further towards your goal, you have to find a way to fight back.
So you
So,
struggle
yeah, just
through
getting to places is suffering.
all of that.
Then you have to
Um,
deal with the Myron swarms, which those are bugs.
you then actually fight a plague bearer.
And then you get to the King of the Hill, blah, 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 waves of filth. Like, I kind of want to, but I also kind of don't, just because it's an entire adventure hook, but also I don't.
So,
I don't know.
part 2, you meet Thanator. And then
Oh, look at that! Look at that traitor guardsman that became a zombie.
It looks beautiful.
I actually really love that art.
I like the lumps.
The neck goiter is a good touch. Needs more iodine.
So Thanator, performing a role, and he seeks to judge the true scope of the heretic's ambition. Having done so, they must pay a price expected of them. Price they have no choice but to pay with their very lives.
Yep. Also, GMs, you should at this point actually have read this back to forth. Otherwise, things get wacky.
So I believe in this case, you probably performed something for Thanator, and you basically get the planet of Mire on your side.
Well, no. Here's the thing, though. The reason why you have to know this back and forth, whatever happens next, you're gonna kill your entire fucking party. Because remember, this is Nurgle we're dealing with. Death and rebirth. You're gonna kill all of them, and your players are not gonna know that until they get reborn. So you have to keep everyone engaged despite that.
Oh, and here's the test.
Yeah.
A Brotherhood of Grey Knights.
Mm-hmm.
That's 100 of them. They're phantasmal, at least, but that's 100 Grey Knights.
100 Grey Knights.
You're fucked. Oh, and then after that, you face apparently.
Well, no. Here's the thing.
Oh no.
Let me.
Yeah.
You forgot the part where even if you somehow kill all 100 Grey Knights, more of them keep spawning until they are all dead.
Actually, before that, you fight Daemon Princess.
Oh yeah, basically, if they somehow get through all of this, just invent more bullshit until they're all dead.
Well, no, it's depending on which you choose. If you choose Apotheosis, you fight the Daemon Princess. If you choose Black Crusade, you fight the Grey Knights. If you choose to be a Dominion of the Lord of Vortex, they fight against Tac Assassins.
Yup.
If they choose Unknowable Ambition, they fight Xenos. Any of them.
Beautiful. And you keep it going until they're all dead.
In the event of the group defeating the enemy, the moment the last row hits the ground, the battlefield blurs in unreality. The heretics find themselves in the next setting, undergoing the trial for the ambition of the heretic with the next highest infamy score. The trials continue until all the heretics are slain. However, in the event that they defeat every enemy against them, or
Spawn
someone
more until they die.
tedious, in this case, GM is supposed to say, at the moment of your victory, the cold void that is the frozen heart rises up as the maw of some oceanic leviathan, and is all black. This then is death. Your path to glory ends here. You now dwell within the realm of Nurgle, whose essence is not simply death but rebirth. You awaken in the garden of Nurgle, but all is not as was before. Rather, the garden itself is alive with riotous motion, which results helps in the form of a greater demon of Nurgle, a great and clean one, and its amusement at your presence is writ large upon its hideous features.
I actually kind of like how this book legitimately allows the GM to just murder all of their player characters.
Yeah, then says, finally, when all the heretics have been slain.
It moves to the pivotal moment. You can impose a brief moment of reflection on the players to consider the ends of their heretics meant. If it looks like they have given up on their characters, they can remind the players that Nurgle's the god of death, but also rebirth. Because that's the thing. Yes, you are designed to kill all of your characters, but that leads into part 3. The rebirth. And on top of that, it opens up with how your characters die. And they are judged by the very gods. Having gotten through as much as they did, they awaken, and the path of glory having taken them to the screaming vortex it may. You've proven yourself worthy of the blessings of the powers by giving your very lives to prove the scope of their ambition. Also, should any of the heretics have earned sufficient infamy to qualify attempt apotheosis, the time to do so is now. Because that can happen. You might have 100 enough infamy to achieve it. Now, how does that work? It's actually found on pages 63 to 73 here. One or more heretics achieving the goal of an aspiring champion and achieving that state would make one of the most satisfying ends possible to a campaign. Should the heretic find they turn into a spawn, you find yourselves at the mercy. Which
The
is kind of
reward
cute.
is if you decided to not fight to the death, and did not have some worthy scheme when doing so, they confront the awful consequences of attempting to flee back down the path of glory.
Yep.
You take Hellish, a minus 60 willpower test.
Hellish. This is something you almost never see. Hellish difficulty.
Any character who fails immediately gains a number of corruption points equal to 10 times the number of degrees of failure by which they failed the test.
Yep.
Lose the same number of infamy points. Any character that passes the 100 corruption threshold is just a chaos spawn.
Yep.
Any heretic whose infamy falls below 0 is cast out by the gods, and word of his failure echoes across not only the Screaming Vortex, but across all the realms of chaos.
Yes.
So even in Age of Sigmar, they know you're a coward.
Yeah.
In either case, the player character should retire to create a new one if the campaign is to continue. But if the character manages to avoid either of these
Somehow, if you pull this off, which can actually be an interesting take.
Yep. And then finally, the wages of sin, which is, I guess, the finality of the whole thing. As they say, if the Heart of Vortex has been completed as the fourth and final God-specific challenge, and assuming the GM has run the other adventures between those present in the four supplements, the achievements gained in previous encounters should be considered if the action is to continue and to launch a Black Crusade.
Essentially, this is the whole point of this is essentially where you're kind of trying to turn them into leaders of Black Crusades.
Because at the end of the Tome of Fate, you would have been involved in the Masters of the planet Quasal, and you now have a powerful sorcerers, daemon engines, hordes of friendly cultists, or even Thousand Suns.
Basically, the prior books do the following. You earn the blessings of the 3 prior gods. This is where you get Nurgle's blessing, and this is where essentially, while you may not be on the same level as Abaddon, like you're not going to be maybe on the same level as all of them, although you might become a Daemon Prince. Essentially,
Abaddon.
at this point, you have proven your worth to your devotion, your ambitions, your desires, your wills, enough to the point where you're not really a character anymore. You're going to be leading the destruction of all.
So the Tome of Blood would give you like a bunch of mutants and a powerful daemon weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Access gives you a entire fleets of pirate vessels, and of course, in each of these, you can also get the attention of a warband of the Chaos Mark, the specific mark.
And if you undergo the rebirth ritual on Meyer, you actually gain not just the loyalty of a variety of Myrans, but a plague that is their nastiest one yet.
Yeah, you are ready to rain havoc.
Also, this book gives you a Daemon Prince character sheet. Because again, it's entirely possible you apotheosize during the
Oh,
ritual.
I like this. Demonic true name.
Yup.
Crack out the Lost in the Damned and roll up that table.
Speaking of which, several mirrors of 1D4chan have been rediscovered, which means all of the creation tables they made for 40k are back on the menu, lads.
There's the Archive 2D4 chan, and then there is what they're trying to update is 1D6 chan.
Which I'm actually happy about. I would seriously recommend, since I very much love creation tables, you probably want to make sure you get them in case it goes down again.
Oh, well, then we'll just make 1D8 chan.
Mm-hmm. But here's the demon sheet, and that's where we ended on. And oh my, it's been a while since we've had a book that went over 3 hours, but I really do think the Chaos God tomes are worth it.
Chock full of detail, imagery, and
Poetic prose that, in
Yeah.
a lot of cases, like the planets we talked about, barring Meyer, and that's only just because, I'll be honest, my negative impression of Meyer is more just because I realized how long we were going on. I would have been totally okay with going longer, but it's just I try to keep to about a period of time if I can. But holy shit, this is a very good book. Oh my god. It covers so many things that you wouldn't otherwise think about running a Black Crusade campaign. It even talks about what happens after you become a Daemon Prince, like some stuff you can do. Holy shit. Good night, not Nito. Overall, this is, I would say, an excellent book. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a must-buy, but honestly, if you plan on seriously running Black Crusade, it's not a bad idea to get the 4 tomes anyway. You don't need them. That's kind of the point of Black Crusade. You can run most Fantasy Flight games just on their core book, and just a good bit of homebrew and your guising. But unironically, I genuinely like this book. It gives you ideas on what to do beyond. It kind of covers what Amber wanted to do, but better. It encourages you to bust out minis if you have them. And last but not least, it legitimately gives the GMs the right to murder all of their players and get away with it.
So, well, if you want to discuss further about this, we do have the Discord.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, have a good night, everyone.
Have an excellent night, and make sure to keep in mind that Papa loves you and accept the common cold for what it is. Him saying hi.